What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto x Rin? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Good morning, class. Naruto held his breath as his classmates returned their teacher's greeting in bored voices. Iruka-sensei wore a smile as he sat at his desk, and Naruto suppressed a snicker. Alright everyone, your graduation exam is just about a month away, Iruka-sensei said, moving to stand. I thought it would be best to. The Chunin instructor cut himself off with a yelp as he stumbled forward, crashing to the ground with his chair stuck to his ass. There was a moment of stunned silence before Naruto led the way into the class, erupting in laughter. That was great. Operation Iruka faceplant, success. Naruto thought with a grin. Iruka disentangled himself from the chair with a glow of blue energy around his rear, and glared around the classroom with a faint blush. The class merriment died down under his gaze, and the young teacher studied his students with a firm frown. When the teacher's attention made it to Naruto, the blonde did his best to school his features, but the Chunin's eye twitched and Naruto knew he had been made. Naruto, stay after class. Most of the students laughed again at his expense, even as Naruto grinned sheepishly at the attention. Now, as I was saying, Iruka stared down his student, taking little joy at how the continued silence made Naruto squirm in his seat. The remainder of the school day had seen the blonde acting as his normal rambunctious self despite getting called out in front of the class. What'll it be this time, Iruka-sensei? The kid asked, rubbing the back of his neck and offering the start of a wide smile. Mopping the floors? Cleaning the blackboards? Iruka sighed at Naruto's nonchalant tone. The boy had grown familiar with all of the typical punishments, and Iruka wondered if it was even worth bothering to try and teach him a lesson anymore. He recalled his own history of acting out and sighed, wondering if he could reach Naruto as the Sandaime Hokage had reached Iruka. Sensei? Naruto's concerned tone brought Iruka back to the present. Naruto? He trailed off, a spark resembling an idea that might become a plan guiding him forward. Why do you want to be a ninja? Naruto blinked, looking taken aback. Because I'm going to be Hokage someday, he declared as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Iruka repressed his usual grimace at the lofty goal, having trouble fathoming how far Naruto was from ever achieving it. How? He asked instead, keeping his face neutral. How are you going to become Hokage? Naruto did not hesitate in his answer. I'm going to be the strongest ninja Konoha has ever seen, Datbeo. Naruto grinned. Then everyone will have to acknowledge me as Hokage. His reasoning was flawed, but Iruka latched onto the opening it provided. And how can you be the strongest ninja if you never pay attention in class? He kept frustration and dismissal far from his tone. He could not afford to put the kid on the defensive too quickly. Still, when Naruto scoffed at the question, it was all Iruka could do to keep his reaction limited to a twitch of his left eye. Nay, come on sensei. Nobody needs to know all the stuff you talk about in class to be a ninja, Naruto whined, holding his arms behind his head and leaning back in his chair to balance it on two legs. Iruka forced himself to remain calm. What's a shinobi's greatest weapon, Naruto? He could not help the irritation starting to bleed into his voice. Strong jutsu? Naruto half asked, scratching his cheek in thought. Iruka pinched the bridge of his nose, the puckered skin of his scar rough against his fingers. This was only the most important lesson he tried to drive home to his students from the word go. No, Naruto. A ninja's best weapon is their mind. Naruto's brow furrowed in thought, and Iruka felt the fleeting hope that he had cracked Naruto's thick skull. I don't get it. Iruka's head hit his desk with a dull thump. Let me try putting it this way, then, Iruka said after taking a moment to recover. What is the Sandaime Hokage's nickname? The professor, Naruto said without hesitation. Right, and why is he called that? Because he knows a bunch of really strong jutsu. Naruto declared with a snap of his fingers. So I was right. That wasn't the point, Iruka said, sighing. How do you think Sandaime-sama learned all of those jutsu, Naruto? By training? His student said as if it were a trick question. You're half right. Hokage-sama became so powerful because he trained and studied his ass off. Iruka saw something approaching thoughtfulness move in Naruto's eyes and went in for the kill. At one point, though, Hokage-sama was exactly where you are now. Naruto started to grin and give a thumbs up, but Iruka plowed on. The difference, though, is that the Hokage actually applied himself into mastering the basics and wasn't pulling useless pranks so people would give him the time of day. Naruto's face fell and Iruka's gut twisted, but he did not let his guilt show on his face. It was not easy to break a kid's bad self-image like this, but he had to try. Without mastering the basics, the Sandaime would never have become as powerful as he is. The same goes for every other Hokage and powerful ninja in our history. Iruka braced himself for the finishing blow. As of right now, Naruto, I doubt you'll even graduate, and you'll never have a chance to try to get to their level. Betrayal, anger, and defiance all shined in Naruto's blue eyes behind a film of unshed tears. Iruka's years of training kept his expression guarded. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but Iruka cut him off. I tell you this because I do believe you have it in you to be great, Naruto. The dark emotions in the boy's eyes disappeared in a flash of shock. You believe in me? Iruka blinked, unable to hide how surprised he was by the fragility in Naruto's tone. Perhaps he had gone too far? I do, Iruka said with grim sincerity. If you apply yourself, master the basics in time to graduate, then the sky's the limit for you, Naruto. Naruto burst from his seat, jaw set and a finger pointing right at Iruka's face. The light caught his eyes, setting them to burn a blue blaze of determination. Then you got it, Iruka-sensei. I'll get the basics down better than anyone else and surpass the old man in no time, dat Bayo. Naruto grinned, and Iruka found it infectious as he nodded his agreement. The student waved and shot out the door with the energy that came with youth, and Iruka could only hope his latest lecture had actually taken root in Naruto's psyche. Only time would tell. Sarutobi Hiruzen took a deep drag on his pipe as he sifted through the last pile of paperwork on his docket for the day. The heat warmed his throat and lungs, comforting him as he tore through the bureaucratic necessity with practiced ease. He rushed the process, eager to move on to one of the few duties he could say he enjoyed without caveats. With the newest class of genin set to graduate in less than a week, it fell to the Hokage to study the likely graduates and match them best with a Jonin instructor. This particular class not only contained the heirs to 6 of Konohagakure's most prominent clans, but also had more potential from the remaining students than average batch of rookies. He grinned around his pipe. It did an old man's heart well when the next generation showed such promise. A knock sounded on his door, followed by the muffled voice of one of his secretaries. Hokage-sama, your appointment is here. Sarutobi's smile faded and he applied his signature to one last piece of paper. Send her in, he called, and settled back in his chair to grant his guest with his full attention. You asked to see me, Hokage-sama? Nohara Rin asked, standing at attention just inside his office's doorway. Sarutobi studied his Jonin for a long moment, frowning at her tense stance. She opted to wear her Jonin vest, stiff from disuse, over her typical dark purple shirt and black shinobi standard pants, both pressed and flawless in their presentation, and her normal, haphazard bun of brunette hair had been traded in for a disciplined ponytail. It was the most formal the Hokage had seen her in almost a decade. Feeling a wave of guilt, he wondered when the last time he spoke to her beyond their monthly meetings had been. How are things, Rin? His chief medical shinobi blinked at him as if he were a simpleton. As I said in my report last week, Hokage-sama, she said after a pregnant pause. The hospital's operations are running at peak efficiency. We've just had a fresh group of Chunin recruits that made the grade out of Genin Corp, and Iyasa-san is confident he can have them on the floor within a half year. Sarutobi hummed at her report, nearly a word-for-word retelling of the update she had provided the week before. In her time at Konoha General, Rin had risen through the ranks with adept skill in medical jutsu, and, since her taking over as chief, the medical corp had steadily bloomed in size. But that was not why she was here, and Sarutobi suspected she knew it. Your remarkable work aside, Rin, he said, setting down his pipe and locking eyes with the Jonin. But you did not answer my question. How are things with you? A slight shift in the shoulders and the almost indistinguishable agitation of the chakra were Sarutobi's only indication of Rin's reaction. There is nothing extraordinary to report, Hokage-sama. Everything is fine. Unspoken, but clear in her tone was the question of why was he asking. The bags under her eyes not quite hidden beneath a subtle layer of makeup and her skin's complexion being pale enough for the rectangular, Purple markings crossing her jaw on each cheek to stand out like beacons in the night would have been worrying on their own, but dismissible as the result of issues he trusted his Jonin to manage on their own. But there were always exceptions, and when trusted colleagues reported their concern, Sarutobi paid closer attention. And her worried at what he saw. "How long has it been, Rin, since you've left the village?" Rin frowned, before answering. "Nearly 8 years. And in that time, I've been told you have gradually cut yourself off from your peers?" "I've been busy running a hospital," Rin said, heat entering her voice. "And your colleagues speak nothing of praise for you, but none seem to know you well outside of your role. Others have come to me to express their concern." Rin pawned her forehead, daring to cut off Sarutobi for the first time. "Kakashi," she said with a long-suffering sigh. Sarutobi kept his expression neutral, unsurprised she had guessed correctly. The two former teammates had not spoken in years, from what he gathered, but that had not stopped Kakashi from bringing his troubled beliefs to Sarutobi's attention. "Regardless of my sources," Sarutobi said, leveling a firm gaze on Rin until she sank back into her formal stance. "To a shinobi, isolation only ever ends in disaster." Rin's jaw tightened and Sarutobi took a subtle breath, preparing for the fallout. "You are being reassigned, sir," Rin objected, facade of formality fading in lieu of despair. "I've given everything to the hospital ever since." The Hokage held up a hand, and his Jonin fell silent. "The decision has been made, Rin." He tapped a paper on his desk, the list of all potential genin in this year's academy class. "You are to lead a team of rookie genin as their Jonin commander." She blanched. "You want me teaching? After everything?" "There are few things better for the mind and soul," Sarutobi said, softening his tone with a smile. "Than passing on knowledge to the next generation. I have little doubt you will make an excellent teacher, Rin." He saw her jaw work itself behind closed lips as she constructed arguments in her head, keeping her brown eyes locked on Sarutobi's. He bore the brunt of her stare for long minutes before the set of her shoulders sagged in recognition of the inevitability of his victory. "Can I at least see a list of students?" she asked. He slid the paper toward her and she snapped it up, eyes flicking over the names in rapid movements until she discovered the name Sarutobi knew would give her pause. "If I'm going to do this," she said, and Sarutobi did not press her illusion of choice. "I want Sensei's son." She placed the list back down on the desk, two fingers pressing against Naruto's name and her jaw set in stubborn demand. A flash of the girl she had once been. Sarutobi inclined his head in agreement. Pre-assigned placements were not common, but neither were they unheard of. With Uchiha Sasuke already destined to be tested by Kakashi, few would be able to object to Naruto being placed as well. Should he pass the graduation exam, Sarutobi said with an air of finality. "Uzumaki Naruto will be a member of your genin team." He was pleased to see something akin to a smile flicker across her lips, if only for a short moment. "Now, I'm sure you have a good deal of preparations to make for this transition." "Yes, Hokage-sama," Rin agreed, making to take her leave with a bow. He waited until she was just at the office door to speak a final word. "And Rin?" She paused, one hand on the door frame, and looked to him over her shoulder. "My office is always open to my shinobi, for whatever the reason." She stood for a long moment before nodding and taking her leave. Hiruzen packed fresh tobacco in his pipe and sighed, wondering how the actions of the day would affect the future. He could only hope that joy of shepherding a genin team could spark Rin's will of fire. As he let out a puff of fresh smoke, he resigned himself to the familiar ritual of waiting. "Damn it," Naruto cursed as another leaf exploded on his overturned palm, leaving a fresh, stinging patch of singed skin to join the dozens of others. He had been at this exercise for weeks and had made little progress. The rest of his class could perform the leaf-sticking chakra control technique, and Naruto felt no small amount of frustration over why he still could not. With a growl he picked up another leaf and took a deep breath. "Focus on your chakra, guide it to your hand into the leaf so it stuck, and Gah, stupid leaves," he shouted, shaking out his smarting hand. The last few weeks had been a flurry of books, scrolls, and burned leaves for him. The day after his talk with Iruka-sensei, Naruto had gone back to the teacher with a sheepish admission of not knowing where to start, and the Chunin instructor had provided him a lesson plan to follow. With his taijutsu already passable, and both the Kawarimi and Henge mastered, Naruto only had to focus on his general knowledge and the Bunshin. He spent most of his days buried in books until he was ready to snap, or attempting to master the basic chakra control exercise that would let him perform the bunshin. The plan had Iruka-sensei's guarantee that if Naruto followed it, he would pass the graduation exam without issue. But with the exam tomorrow and the bunshin still not mastered, Naruto began to doubt his teacher's word. "Yo, Naruto. Surprised to see you here at this hour," said the gray-haired Chunin who had served as Iruka-sensei's teaching assistant for almost all of Naruto's time at the academy. The man approached with his hands stuffed in his pockets and his shoulders set in a slouch, looking as laid back as ever. "Hey, what are you doing here, Mizuki-sensei?" Naruto took advantage of the academy's training grounds, and the place was almost always deserted by this time of the evening. "Oh, just checking on a few things for Iruka," he said with a shrug, eyes crinkling as he smiled. "Are you ready for the exam tomorrow?" Naruto hung his head, downcast. "I'm trying to get this chakra control stuff down, but I don't think I'll do it in time." It was a hard thing to admit, but Mizuki-sensei never judged him when he couldn't do something. "Yeah, that's rough, but maybe." Mizuki-sensei tapped his chin in thought, looking Naruto up and down with squinted eyes. "Nah, I probably shouldn't tell you this." "Tell me what?" Naruto asked, unable to stop his curiosity. "Well, if you're going to be Hokage someday, I guess it would be great if you owed me one, right?" Mizuki smiled, snapping his fingers, and Naruto felt his chest puff up in pride. "All right, I doubt I can help you get chakra control down in time," he admitted, and Naruto's brief hope deflated. "But I can tell you how to graduate." "How?" Naruto asked, head snapping up to catch Mizuki-sensei's eyes. If there was a way around getting the bunshin down, he would go for it. Mizuki-sensei cast a look around before leaning over and beckoning Naruto closer. He spoke in a whisper. "There's a secret test. It's dangerous enough that we only ever offer it to the best of the best students. Not even Sasuke knows about it, but I've seen how hard you've been working, and I think you can pull it off." Naruto's heart sped up and he bounced on the balls of his feet. Iruka-sensei had been right. Mastering the basics was already paying off. If you manage to pass, though, you'll be promoted to genin straight away without having to take the academy exam. Mizuki-sensei shared a grin with Naruto. "Interested? Of course. I can take on whatever it is, no problem." "That's what I thought you'd say." Mizuki-sensei pulled a scroll out of his back pocket and rolled it out onto the ground, showing blueprints labeled the Hokage Tower. A red X marked a room right by the old man Hokage's office. "There's a special scroll in the Hokage Tower reserved for this test," the teacher explained, pointing toward the X. "Get in without being stopped, grab the scroll off the pedestal, and find your way out." "What's on the scroll, Mizuki-sensei?" Naruto asked, mind whirring as his blood pumped in anticipation. He was the first one in the class to go on an actual mission. "Take that, Sasuke Teme." "And that's the best part," Mizuki-sensei said, furling up his blueprints. "There's a bunch of special jutsu available to only those strong enough to pass the test." Naruto's eyes glazed over as he considered the endless possibilities. "You won't have much time." Mizuki-sensei studied the sun as it sank in the sky. "Get the scroll to me in training ground 29 by 10 o'clock. "Think you can handle that?" "Definitely." "Good, and one more thing." The Chunin ran a hand along the back of his neck, suddenly sheepish. "I'm sort of doing this behind Iruka's back since he didn't think you're ready for this yet. So let's both prove him wrong, eh?" Naruto's excitement died at the thought of Iruka-sensei not believing in him as much as he claimed to have, but his determination remained solid in his belly, pushing him forward to prove the Chunin wrong. "I won't let you down, Mizuki-sensei." Dat Bayo. He raced off toward the Hokage Tower, knowing exactly how he would get past the old man. Rin strolled through the streets of Konoha just as day surrendered itself over to twilight. She did not often make a habit of wandering around the village without purpose, but found it had helped keep her calm in the days since her meeting with the Hokage. It had been a shock when the man confronted her with his concerns and made his decision, and she had not regained her balance since. She had worked her ass off to get Konoha's medical corp back into tip-top shape, taking pride in how well it performed. She left everything in her work, and wanted little to do other than keep to herself in her downtime. Rin thought the village owed her that much, at least, but it was apparently too much to ask for. She shook her head and sighed. Ever since he had been released from duties as an ANBU, Kakashi had upped his efforts to claw his way back into her circle. The man must have gone to the Hokage rather than understand the fact that it was better if she had nothing to do with him, and managed to take away the one thing in this damned village that she found worth her time. She let out an irritated huff of air and tried not to think how Iyasa would bungle all the progress she had made at the hospital. The man was second only to her in ability, but was prone to nervousness and had been an absolute wreck ever since he found he was to take over her position, possibly for years. Dealing with Iyasa as a shadow all week had been a miserable and trying experience. She took a turn and found herself staring up at the faces carved into the side of the Hokage mountain. She met the stony gaze of her sensei's likeness with a frown, wondering how he had ever managed to corral her, Obito, and Kakashi into a respectable squad of shinobi. After working nowhere outside of the hospital for 7 years, she held her doubts she could match his proficiency. The thought of 3 young, impressionable minds looking to her as she had once looked to Minato sensei made her stomach drop, and she longed for the days where she could show up at sensei's doorstep begging for advice. But the Kyuubi attack took that option away from her years before, and Rin tried to ignore the familiar ping of impotent regret. Dwelling in the past did little good. Instinct guided Rin to step off to the side before her ears registered the commotion caused by a pair of Chunin racing by her and taking the next opportunity to leap toward the rooftops. She blinked at their unusual urgency, and tilted her head to hear if she had missed any of the village's warning sirens. She heard none, but grew worried when the heavy footfalls of at least 3 teams of shinobi all sounded on the roof above her, speeding toward the back of the village. Curiosity piqued, she jumped to the rooftops and gave her colleagues case. The lack of effort it took her to catch up to one of the runners indicated he was, at best, a Chunin. "What's going on?" she asked, tone clipped. The 20-something-year-old glanced her way and she found him vaguely familiar, recognizing the long scar running below each eye and across his nose. "Irio-san?" "Ah, a patient," she identified, nodding at his question. Hokage-sama sent flyers to the active Chunin in village. "There weren't many details, but it has to be big," the Chunin said, waving an arm out to the other shinobi joining them as they approached the Hokage tower. Rin judged there to be several dozen. She hummed her agreement at his assessment and tagged along, deciding the distraction it offered would do her well. They arrived in the middle of a pack of shinobi and watched as the Sandame studied the group with a steely gaze hinting at skilled shinobi beneath his typical facade. About 1 hour ago, their commander spoke as the ebb of arriving ninja slowed to nothing. Konoha's scroll of forbidden techniques was stolen. Surprised, panicked murmurs broke out around her, but Rin narrowed her eyes at the old Hokage. Some of the techniques the scroll contained could spell disaster for Konoha if they ever fell into the wrong hands, so why had he summoned only Chunin? Who could have done this? A pale-eyed Hyuga near the front asked in a shout, the veins around his eyes bulging in his clan's ocular technique. The Sandame closed his eyes, seeming to brace himself. Uzumaki Naruto. Rin's heart skipped a beat as her would-be student was named and she felt a deep disappointment that settled right in her gut. "What?" her Chunin running mate shouted, objection clear in his question. Naruto would never do that, not even for a prank. And yet he has, Iruka. The Hokage stretched himself up to his full height. "It is of the utmost importance that Naruto is found and brought to me alive. This will be considered a B-rank mission, and successful completion will be awarded accordingly." Dismissed. How the hell did he even manage to pull this off? Iruka muttered at her side, starting to march toward the Hokage even as his compatriots all left to see to the task. The Chunin spoke a few hasty words with the village leader before racing off in a direction opposite most of the others. Rin followed behind Iruka at a relaxed pace, determining the man knew something the rest of their brethren did not. Mizuki wore a wide grin as he jumped through the forests winding between Konoha's training grounds. From the commotion in the village, he knew his plan had gone off without a hitch. Only the need for stealth kept him from laughing aloud. Turning the Kyuubi brat's newfound motivation for his own benefit had been brilliant, in Mizuki's estimation. The Uzumaki being at the point where he would do anything to pass made it all the easier. With any luck, Naruto would take the fall and nobody would notice Mizuki's absence until the next day at the earliest. "Yata, I'll pass the test for sure, now, Datbeo." Mizuki rolled his eyes and picked up his pace as Naruto's excited shout echoed through the forest. If anyone was nearby enough to hear, he had gained a time limit. Naruto, what the hell were you thinking? Shit, shit, shit. Mizuki stopped short just within the forest on the edge of training ground 29. Of fucking course the bleeding heart would manage to get in my way. Mizuki clenched his jaw and drew a kunai, waiting. Iruka-sensei, I passed the secret test. I even mastered a super strong jutsu, Datbeo. Naruto laughed at his words, actually bouncing on his feet. Secret test? Iruka looked at Naruto as if he had grown 5 heads. Naruto, you stole the scroll of forbidden jutsu. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in? Naruto's joy died on his face at Iruka's tone. Eh? Forbidden jutsu? Naruto scratched the back of his head, looking at the scroll that rivaled the student for size through narrowed eyes. Mizuki-sensei said this was a secret graduation scroll. So much for getting out without suspicion, Mizuki thought, dropping from the trees to land behind Iruka in a crouch. Iruka's shoulders sagged as he spoke. So Mizuki is the one that told you to do this? The Chunin instructor shook his head, spiky, upturned ponytail swaying with the motion. Naruto, you need to give me the scroll and we can get back to the village to set this straight. Naruto seemed torn and Mizuki considered his play. If he could kill Iruka in one blow, he would have little trouble taking out the kid and getting out. But if Iruka managed to survive a surprise attack, Naruto would have a chance to get away, and Mizuki was not certain he could take the other Chunin in a straight 1 versus 1. He blew out a silent breath and raised from his crouch, speaking, don't be pissed just because the kid pulled one over on you, Iruka. His colleague spun around in a flash, putting himself between Mizuki and Uzumaki with a raised kunai. Toss over the scroll, Naruto, and I'll make sure you pass despite Iruka's interference. Mizuki held himself ready to engage as he sidestepped opposite Iruka in a wide circle, trying to get closer to Naruto. Not a chance in hell. Naruto, you've got to run back to the village and get that scroll back to the Hokage. Do it now. Naruto gripped the scroll to his chest, torn. This isn't part of the test, is it? There is no test. That's just what he wants you to think. Naruto, think, Iruka said. I've done everything I can to help you graduate. Why would I have reason to lie now? Naruto blinked, and Mizuki saw the moment he lost when the determination settled in the student's eyes. I can think of one hell of a reason, Mizuki said, switching tracks. Have you ever wondered why most of the people in the village treat you like crap, Naruto? Mizuki, don't. Hesitation faltered Naruto's steps before he could run back toward the village. Blue eyes studied Mizuki with a cautious intensity of curiosity. It's an S-rank secret, Mizuki explained, not letting his eyes linger far from Iruka lest the Chunin opted to attack. The Hokage made this information top secret on pain of death, but I think you deserve to know. Tell me. Naruto's voice gained the rough edge that preluded tears. Iruka's eyes flicked toward the student, his guard opening for the briefest of seconds, but Mizuki took advantage. Steel flew through the air with a snap of the wrist, and a full brace of shuriken arced toward Iruka and Naruto with deadly intent. Iruka caught the motion with wide eyes and leapt back toward Naruto rather than try to defend, and Mizuki's grin twisted as he awaited the victorious squelch of metal ripping through flesh and blood. To his utter shock, his weapons were thrown off course by rival shuriken just as Iruka hugged Naruto close to shield the student with his body. Targeting an unarmed child is the act of a coward, a cold, feminine voice called through the clearing. Mizuki snapped his attention to the left, sweat blooming on his brow as he recognized the newcomer as a Jonin from her dress. She stood firm, kunai in hand, and a look of utter distaste etched into her pretty features. Mizuki felt his chance of escape fizzle with each passing moment. Iruka, he gave himself a good chance to handle. Naruto would be little more than a passing nuisance. But a Jonin? He inched his hand toward the pouch on his left hip, his escape option inches and kilometers away. Turn yourself over, Mizuki, the Jonin said, advancing. The Hokage will be more lenient if you do. Mizuki tsked and went all in, flashing his hand into his pouch and launching all of his smoke bombs at his feet while jumping with all his strength toward the academy student. It took less than a second to do, but the Jonin's kunai still managed to slice across his hip in a bloody gash. He grunted in pain and returned with his own volley of kunai and shuriken in the trio's general direction, trying to orientate himself toward Naruto to make a play for the scroll. Naruto, protect the scroll. Iruka's shout sounded above the din of metal deflecting metal. Mizuki spotted a flash of orange through the smoke and latched onto the back of the boy's jacket, unleashing all of the killing intent he could muster as he spoke. "Give me the scroll, brat." Naruto did the unexpected and responded with a foot to Mizuki's balls. It took all of Mizuki's willpower to stay on his feet as Naruto scrambled away. "Come and get it, Mizuki Teme." The smoke cleared enough for Mizuki to see the blonde flipping him off. His left eye twitched as he pushed the pain out of his mind. He was going to enjoy killing the brat. He leapt forward to give chase, but Iruka tackled him out of the air before he could get close. "Keep away from him." If the air was not driven from his lungs, Mizuki would have made a quip about how Iruka resorted to brawling tactics. He rolled with the blow, ignoring the instinctual panic coming with the inability to draw breath, got his legs underneath his opponent, and sent Iruka flying away from him and into a nearby tree with a satisfying thunk. Chakura no Mesu. Almost bored, the Jonin took up a position between the recovering Iruka and Mizuki, her hands glowing blue as chakra shaped as blades formed an aura around them. "Leave him to me, Iruka." Iruka did not heed her advice, choosing to take up position next to her, and, to Mizuki's irritation, the blonde idiot of a student had picked up a discarded kunai and flanked the Jonin as well. Without another option, Mizuki opted to cut and run. He launched his remaining weaponry at the Uzumaki and sprinted in the opposite direction as fast as his chakra-laced strides could take him. He registered Iruka crying out in anguish and allowed himself a moment of petty triumph, which was promptly stolen from him as fire erupted within his legs and they went dead beneath him. He could not stop the scream from tearing from this throat, shouting his pain into the earth as he struck it face first. Mizuki could barely register anything outside of the agony within his lower limbs. "I've torn the muscles in your legs clean from the bone. You've lost, Mizuki." Mizuki clenched his eyes shut at the Jonin's words, and his only thought before falling unconscious was the hope he had taken one of them down with him. "And will the traitor survive?" the old man asked, and Naruto wondered if all debriefings would be as boring as this one had proven to be. He stood between Iruka-sensei and the Jonin who had helped them, Rin, as the Hokage asked them question after question without an end in sight. His enthusiasm for being part of something an actual ninja would have been had dried up quickly after he had showed off his new cage bunshin. "He'll live to see his time with Ibiki-senpai," Rin said, but scratched at one of the purple markings along her cheek. "Though he may never walk again. I might have gone overboard." The old man grunted a laugh as he scratched words onto paper. "What will be done with him, Hokage-sama?" Iruka-sensei asked with a grim tone. Naruto marveled at how the Chunin could stand so composed with the entire upper right section of torso wrapped in fresh bandages. He had shielded Naruto from Mizuki's final attack with his body, and Naruto refused to think what would have happened if Rin had not turned out to know medical jutsu. The old man glanced toward Naruto before he answered. "Depending on the information Ibiki can retrieve, Mizuki will either be jailed," the Hokage took a breath, locking eyes with Naruto, "or executed." Naruto's heart clenched at the word, and he could not help but wince despite his feelings toward Mizuki. The old man studied him for a long moment more before nodding and addressing the two older shinobi again. "I believe that's all I need this evening." The Hokage closed the file he had been reading and smiled. "You three should get some rest, you all have exams to prepare for." Naruto hesitated as the other two bowed, and started talking before he chickened out. "Actually, old man, I have a question." 3 sets of eyes locked onto Naruto, and he did his best not to fidget. "Right before he attacked, Mizuki Teme said he know an S-class secret about me. He said he knew why everyone." Naruto trailed off, not quite able to put words to his situation. The Hokage sighed and took the time to pack his pipe with fresh tobacco and light it before he started to speak. "I had planned on telling this to you once you graduated, but I suppose that is all but a formality now." Naruto and the Hokage shared a brief smile at that. "Do you know what happened to the village 12 years ago? On your birthday? How could I forget? The Kyuubi attacked the village," he said. There were still celebrations every year and it had been one of Iruka-sensei's most repeated lessons. The Yondaime sacrificed his life to kill it and save the village. The old man nodded along with Naruto's explanation. "That is the story we tell, but it is not the complete truth." Naruto frowned, casting an accusing look toward Iruka-sensei even as Rin muttered, understatement, under her breath. The Chunin teacher studied the ceiling rather than meet Naruto's eyes. The Yondaime did sacrifice himself to stop the Kyuubi that night, the old man continued. But not even he had the power to kill a Biju. You see, Naruto, tailed beasts are not mortal creatures like you or I, they are beings of pure chakra. Should they somehow be slain, they will eventually reform again. Naruto scratched the back of his head and thought. Makes sense, sort of. So how did he stop it? There's only one way to reliably keep a tailed beast under control. The Hokage took a long drag on his pipe. Using his unparalleled skill in Fuinjutsu, the Yondaime sealed the Kyuubi away into a newborn babe, creating a Jinchuriki. Naruto's heart sank as he grasped the unspoken. That was me, wasn't it? Yes, the old man said with a nod. Naruto hung his head, understanding his situation more than ever before. Why the villagers always whispered as he passed? Why nobody ever acknowledged him? He was a demon. His fists clenched. Naruto, I need you to listen to me now. The Hokage's tone drew Naruto's eyes back up to the old man. Naruto could not remember the last time he saw the Sandaime so serious. Despite what the uninitiated may think, Jinchuriki are not the beasts they hold within. The seal the Yondaime entrusted you with ensures that it is absolutely impossible for the Kyuubi no Kitsune to influence you in any way. I am not a demon? Naruto hated how his voice cracked even as relief washed his encroaching depression away. Absolutely not, Iruka-sensei shouted, eyes fierce. Naruto's chest lightened and he found he could breathe easier. You are you and only you, Naruto. I guarantee it, the old man said with a wry smile. Minato-sensei's seals were legendary, kid. Rin spoke up for the first time with a smile that somehow seemed sad. There's no way he screwed up his last one. Give it enough time, Naruto, and the villagers will see you as we do. The Hokage finished, the skin around his eyes crinkling as he smiled. A proud defender of Konoha. I'll just have to become strong enough that they'll know I'm not the Kyuubi, Datbeo. He punched a fist into an open palm, feeling balanced for the first time since he had found the forbidden scroll. Assuming you pass your genin exam, Naruto. Naruto hung his head at Iruka's words. Leave it to the teacher to bring him down from his moment. Alright, dismissed, all of you. Naruto left the Hokage's office filled to the brim with a determination and standing taller with the gift of knowledge. He never would have guessed that knowing why everyone treated him as they did would make him feel so much better, and now he only had to show them all exactly who he was. Jinchuriki or not, he was still going to become Hokage. Datbeo. With a puff of smoke, two identical copies of Naruto popped into existence behind him, matching his widest grin. Iruka-sensei gave him a proud smile while the new teaching assistant watched, slack-jawed. Naruto, Iruka-sensei said, picking up one of the metal-plated hite attache arranged on his desk. From your overall performance, you're last in your class. Naruto's bubbling cheer fizzled at Iruka-sensei's words. Did he have to bring that up? But I'm proud of the work you've put in this month, and I have no doubt that you will be a fine shinobi. The teacher handed the hite 8 to Naruto with a nod. You pass, congratulations. Naruto pumped his fist in the air with a whoop of joy, good mood instantly restored. He snatched the hite 8, took a moment to run his thumb over the engraved symbol of Konoha's spiral leaf, and with just the right amount of fanfare, he yanked his old goggles off and tied the hite 8 in its place. The curved metal rested across his forehead, comfortably warm through its fabric backing, and Naruto felt as if a piece of him he had never known was missing had found its way back. How's it look? Naruto asked, unable to stop smiling. Like it fits, Iruka-sensei said with a laugh before checking his watch. How about I treat you to Ichiraku's as a graduation gift? Naruto did not have to be told twice and, before his teacher could rethink his choice, let out a hasty thanks to Iruka-sensei and ran out the door. By the time his sensei caught up with him 15 minutes later, Naruto was almost through his first bowl of Tuchi's miso ramen. You're never patient, are you? Iruka-sensei asked him with a bemused grin as he sat down on the next stool over. I still had to test Ino, you know. Naruto shrugged and focused on chowing down his food. Nobody in the village could even come close to how amazing Tuchi's food was. A comfortable silence fell between the two while Iruka ordered a bowl for himself and a second for Naruto. You know, Naruto, I'm proud of you. Iruka-sensei said, and Naruto looked up from his noodles with a thankful grin. Not just for finally taking your studies seriously, but for how you handled the whole Mizuki situation. You acted like a true shinobi and didn't let your enemy get into your head. It was no big deal, Iruka-sensei. Naruto rubbed a hand along the back of neck with a forced smile. Mizuki had come close to making Naruto question everything. In a week, you'll be assigned your Jonin-sensei, Iruka-sensei said, not noticing Naruto's feint. And I expect you will continue to work hard every day to be the best ninja you can be. Naruto felt sweat start to bead on his neck under Iruka's intense gaze. But first, the Chunin continued with the grin he wore whenever he assigned an unpleasant amount of homework. Naruto gulped. You're still under my jurisdiction until then, and you are going to master the leaf-sticking exercise this week if it kills both of us. Naruto felt an odd mix of happiness that Iruka-sensei was still trying to help him and irritation that he had somehow managed to get homework after graduation. Iruka-sensei laughed at the look on Naruto's face and tossed a pile of ryo down on the counter. I'll see you bright and early at the academy, the teacher said, still grinning. After we're done, you might not even suck at chakra control. Naruto grumbled in indignation at Iruka-sensei's parting remark. Not my fault I have so much chakra. Looks like Iruka left enough for another bowl, Tsuchi said, stroking his chin. Naruto's eyes lit up, extra work gone from his mind. Naruto planted his feet, ending his run in a skid stopping at his old classroom's door. Sorry I'm late, Iruka-sensei. He called, pushing open the door. Some of the class started to snicker as he stepped into the room and Naruto frowned, confused. Naruto, Iruka-sensei said with a habitual sigh, but paused. Why are you covered in leaves? Naruto blinked, and glanced down at himself. Sure enough, leaves clung to him all over his body, turning his jacket and pants into a motley of green and orange. With swept the greenery away with a faint blush, holding his chin high. He had only just mastered the leaf-sticking technique the night before. Guess I went a little overboard. Just take a seat. Iruka-sensei shook his head, but Naruto spotted the grin trying to form. He shot his teacher a thumbs up and ran to the closest open seat. Next to Haruno Sakura, he flashed her his best smile, but the pink-haired girl just rolled her eyes and made a show of turning her chair so her attention was on the last person in the row of three, Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto felt the familiar pang of disappointment while also bemused that they no longer needed words to go through the motions of his crushes rejecting him. He shrugged and settled into his chair, not thinking about kicking Sasuke's ass as the Sakura tried to engage the boy in conversation. As of today, Iruka-sensei began with a nostalgic tone, cutting off the class chatter. He leaned back against his desk and studied the room of students with a small smile. You all will officially begin your careers as shinobi of Konoha. But before I tell you which Jonin you are assigned to, I wanted to take a moment to tell you how proud I am of all of you. From here on out, you will face challenges unlike anything you have seen before, but I have complete faith in your abilities to overcome anything the shinobi world throws at you. Just promise me you'll come visit your old sensei when you become strong and famous, eh? There was a smattering of laughter as Iruka finished his short speech and the nervous energy in the room seemed to disappear. Now, let's get to what you're all excited for. Teams 1 and 2 are still active, so we'll start with Team 3. Naruto kept a sharp ear out as his pulse quickened. He had not put much thought into who would be on his team, and started to wonder who would be best. His lips quirked up into a grin as his mind imagined being on the same team as Sakura. He would get the chance to show her just how strong he was and convince her to finally go out on a date with him. And Team 7 will be made up of Haruno Sakura, Iruka-sensei said, and both Naruto and Sakura perked up at the girl's name. Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura's joyful shout had Naruto slamming a hand to cover his left ear, wincing. In your face, Ino pig. The kunoichi stood up from her seat, whirled around, and pointed a victorious finger in her blonde rival's face. And Yamanaka Ino. Iruka finished, deadpan. Sakura's arm dropped as she glared at Ino, who laughed and leaned back in her seat, meeting Sakura's eyes with a challenging eyebrow raised. Naruto spared a glance to the object of the girl's affection and found Sasuke looked as stoic as ever as he looked out the window. For the life of him, Naruto could not figure out everyone's obsession with the Uchiha. You three will be under Hitaki Kakashi. Iruka-sensei shook his head as he scratched something off on his clipboard. Team 8. Naruto sighed, dejected. He glanced around the room and tried to judge who was left and would make an awesome teammate, and paused on Shikamaru and Choji. They weren't exactly friends with him, but they weren't. Nara Shikamaru, Akamichi Choji, and Inazuka Kiba will be Team 10 under Sarutobi Asuma. Naruto jolted to attention. Team 10, already? Did I miss my name? Will form Team 11 under Gekko Hayate. And finally Team 12, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. Takawa Natsuko, and Kofuku Ayano. He frowned and glanced at the two girls. He did not know much about either other than one was part of the group that fawned over Sasuke, and the other never talked to anyone and came to class late a lot. You three will be under Nohara Rin, Iruka-sensei finished, setting down his list. Naruto's confidence in his team grew leaps and bounds. She kicked Mizuki's ass with one move. Your commanders will be along shortly, Iruka-sensei said, inclining his head to the class. Good luck. Damn it, Iyasa, Rin muttered under breath as she raced through the academy halls. Her replacement was to have taken over hours ago, but the man did not stop asking question after question to the point where Rin was now 20 minutes late to meet her genin. She skidded to a halt outside the classroom and glanced through the door's window. 6 students sat around the room in various states of boredom, and Rin felt a fraction of relief at not being the last. She took a breath, straightened her jonin vest, and schooled her features as she entered the classroom. Sorry I'm late, she said, and 6 heads snapped her direction, all eager. Team 12? 3 of the genin hung their heads, dejected, but Naruto bounced off his seat with a grin, his teammates following at a more sedate pace. Kids must be Kakashis, she thought, sparing the 3 other genin a sliver of sympathy. Eager, good, she told her students. Meet me at the training ground outside. Before the 3 could respond, Rin performed a silent and sealless shunshin. It wasted too much chakra to be useful in practical situations, but, she thought as she leaned against one of the wooden practice dummies lining the training area, first impressions were important. Whoa sensei, that was awesome. How'd you do that? Naruto's enthusiastic shout had his teammates wincing. It was the body flicker technique, AD rank ninjutsu. The red-headed Kofuku Ayano supplied with a disapproving frown. Iruka-sensei showed it to us last month. Eh? Naruto rubbed the back of his head with a sheepish grin. Guess I missed that day. Ayano looked away with a derisive sniff. All of us even tried to do it that day after class, Rin's third student, Takawa Natsuko said, tapping her chin with her eyes cast upwards in thought. Not even Sasuke-kun was able to get it down though. Where was I? Probably in detention for one of your stupid pranks, Natsuko said, clicking her tongue. My pranks aren't stupid. Naruto glared at the shorter girl, who matched his gaze without hesitation. Really? Who paints the Hokage monument? Seriously. Idiot, the brunette accused with a point. Rin's stomach dropped at her team's antics. Natsuko wore a condescending expression. Naruto was drawing breath for a shouted retort, and Ayano opted to bury her nose in a book. She sent a silent prayer for patience. Enough. Her tone cut to something instinctive in her students as each of the genin snapped their heads in her direction, surprised as if they had forgotten she was there. Her left eye twitched. As first impressions go, she continued. You 3 are terrible at it. She met each of their eyes in turn, adopting her sternest look, and each student bowed their head in apology. She took the gifted chance to assess the genin. Natsuko wore a sleeveless green shirt that fell to her mid-thigh, an abstract brown filigree design winding around the garment in a way that almost looked like a tree. Her black shinobi-grade pants tapered off into taped ankles over standard sandals, and her hite-aid acting as a belt. With a bow staff strapped over her shoulders, a weapons pouch anchored on each hip, and her hair strung up in a high ponytail that reached the base of her neck, Rin judged her ready for combat, offering a nod unseen by the girl's gray eyes. The tallest genin, Ayano, had her hite-aid holding back her shaggy red hair that fell just past her neck. She dressed simply with a blue long-sleeved shirt of heavy material, and the same dark shinobi-grade pants and sandals most ninja in the village favored. What she lacked in fashion sense she made up for in practicality as Rin counted no short of a half-dozen weapons pouches lining her waist and legs. She opted out of the binding tape favored by most ninja, and Rin assumed the girl had more weaponry hidden up her sleeves. Naruto was far better equipped than he had been the previous night. She saw the telltale impression of mesh armor beneath his orange jacket with every breath the boy took, and pouches for kunai and shuriken hung off his belt at the back of his waist where there had been neither before. His Hite-8 glinted in the sun as he chanced to glance up to Rin, hesitant. "If you're done," she said, softening her tone as her genin all raised their heads. "Now's about the time where we introduce ourselves. Who wants to go first?" She received no volunteer as the genin glanced between each other, uncertain. She sighed. "Okay then, I suppose I'll start. My name is Nohara Rin, and I've been a jonin for just about 6 years now." "I am," she paused with a light grimace, "was the head of Konoha General Hospital for the last 3. The 3 genin seemed impressed at that and Rin allowed herself a small smile. "I enjoy helping people in a quiet night with a good book or puzzle. I dislike idiots, slackers, and the ignorant." She gave a pointed look to each of the 3. "Finally, I look forward to teaching you and making you all into the absolute best shinobi you can be." She pointed to Naruto. Well," the boy cleared his throat and stood to his full height. "My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I like ramen and learning cool jutsu. I don't like people who don't like my pranks," he said, giving a sidelong look to Natsuko, who glared back at him. Rin closed her eyes for a brief second. "I will not kill my genin on the first day. Hopes, dreams, plans for the future?" she prompted. Naruto grinned wide, a spark of determination lighting up in his blue eyes. "I'm going to be the greatest Hokage ever. Then everyone will have to acknowledge how awesome I am, Datbeo." Ayano looked at him as if he had grown a second head and Natsuko outright laughed at the declaration, incredulous. The blonde boy deflated, but Rin interrupted before either of the girls could speak. "That is an admirable goal, Naruto." Naruto perked right back up as both girls shot her disbelieving looks. "If you want to achieve it, then I expect you to do your very best to work hard, and I'll do the same to help get you there." He gave her a sharp nod, eyes fierce. She smiled, then cut her eyes to the girl on his left, prompting her to speak. "Well, I'm Takawa Natsuko, and I'm going to follow in my brother's footsteps to be the best sensor shinobi and bojutsu expert in the village. I like Sasuke-kun, training with Mako-ni and my parents, and keeping up with the latest trends. And I dislike idiots," she finished, giving Naruto a meaningful glance. Rin bit back a sigh and motioned for Ayano to speak before the blonde could retort and start arguing with Natsuko once more. Well, the redhead started, shifting from foot to foot and not quite meeting Rin's eyes. "My name is Kofuku Ayano. I like to write and read books by my favorite author." Her pale cheeks flushed softly. "I don't like my freckles and I hope to travel the world and become a strong ninja." She gave an apprehensive look to her teammates as she finished. Well, Rin thought, at least she didn't pick a fight with the others. Still, her team seemed destined to begin with a contentious atmosphere. Her mind wandered back to her early genin days when she and Obito had first joined Kakashi on Team Minato. She sighed. That had been a lifetime ago, now. "Alright. Well," she said to fill the quiet. "Now that we all know each other, I can tell you that you have not quite made it to the genin level just yet." 3 surprised shouts and objections greeted her at that. She held back a smile and raised a hand for silence. "I know you passed the academy exam, but it takes more than that to become a true shinobi. Meet me at Training Ground 12 tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp." Tempting as the idea was, Rin did not stay around to enjoy the shocked look on her genins' faces. She performed another silent shunshin to make her escape before they could recover and bombard her with questions. She heard 3 confused squawks as she raced away and grinned. There was nothing quite as effective as a common challenge to bring people together. Maybe her genin would surprise her and learn to get along? "I can't believe how unlucky we are," Natsuko griped while watching the sky. "I mean, both Sakura and Ino get to be on a team with Sasuke-kun, and we get stuck with Naruto." Ayano, who was busy scribbling in a notebook, hummed in response. Natsuko gave her an odd look. "Are you even listening?" "No." Natsuko went slack-jawed for a moment at the blunt reply. Since her teammate was not paying attention, she tried to entertain herself by twirling her with her staff in a few basic maneuvers, but the silence quickly became too much. "What do you think Sensei's test will be about?" "I don't know." Ayano had not even looked up from her notebook once. Natsuko frowned and rested her chin on her knees. "What are you writing about anyway?" The girl just shrugged. Natsuko furrowed her brow in frustration. She never usually had trouble carrying a conversation, but this girl just was not helping. Do you have anything you want to talk about, then? Not really. Natsuko sighed and fell backward. She never had trouble finding common ground with the other girls in class. They would always talk about Sasuke-kun, or class, or hobbies, or their training, or something. The fact that Ayano did not seem to have anything to say led Natsuko to one conclusion. You're boring, she whined while watching the clouds drift. And you're annoying. Natsuko sat back up and glared at the redhead, who glared right back at her. Hey guys, how's it going? They both snapped their heads in the direction of the new voice. Naruto paled under their gazes. What's wrong? Natsuko held back a scoff. Like she would tell him anything. Her parents had just reminded her the night before to always be wary around Naruto. Nothing, she and Ayano said at the same time. Natsuko locked eyes with the freckled girl, glared for a second, and turned away from both her teammates with her arms crossed. She really was unlucky to be stuck with these two. I'm glad to see you're all getting along so well this morning. Natsuko scrambled to her feet at her sensei's sudden appearance. The Jonin was frowning at them, arms crossed over her flak jacket. I trust you all came prepared? Natsuko nodded along with her teammates. Good. Rin sensei dug into her pocket and brought out two small, round bells. This is your test. Natsuko glanced at the others, but they looked as confused as she felt. This is the same test I was given as a genin, Rin sensei said while tying the bells to her belt below the hem of her purple shirt. Your objective is to get one from me by any means necessary. If you manage to get one, you become a genin. If you don't, then you're out of the program. For good. Natsuko felt her heart quicken in nervous anticipation. Sensei only had 2 bells, which meant that it would be impossible for all of them to pass. She glanced at her classmates, finding that they had realized the same thing. This just became a competition. Remember, you will have to come at me without holding back at all if you want to have a chance at getting the best of me. Anything less and you won't come anywhere close, Rin sensei said with a steely tone. Natsuko felt a familiar determination fill her belly. One usually saved for beating the others to impress Sasuke-kun. You have until noon, begin. Natsuko wasted no time and sped away, intent to find a good place to observe her sensei without being seen. She found a likely tree and crouched in the upper branches, and turned to study her sensei. A direct attack? Not very clever. Natsuko's eyes widened in surprise when she saw a dozen orange blurs charging at Rin sensei. All 12 Narutos were shouting battle cries even as Rin sensei weaved between them, striking each as she passed them. The clones burst into smoke at each strike, and the real Naruto was sent flying backwards across the clearing. Those clones were solid. Natsuko was simultaneously impressed and jealous that he could do that. They definitely didn't teach us that at the academy. Naruto shot back to his feet, rubbing his chest where Rin sensei had hit him. He grinned and formed a ram seal, bringing another dozen clones into existence. Natsuko looked on in disbelief as Naruto tried the same tactic again, then again, and then again. You know, trying the same thing over and over again isn't very bright, Rin sensei said in a dry tone as the brigade of Narutos ran at her once more. I'm actually disappointed you couldn't come up with anything better. Natsuko nodded her agreement to sensei's words. Once again, she bemoaned the fact that she got saddled with their class dead least as a teammate. Rin sensei popped the last clone and kicked Naruto across the field and into the woods. You should just stop trying at this point. Their teacher shouted, bored. No matter what, I never give up. That's my ninja way. Natsuko looked to Naruto with a disbelieving gaze as the boy came running out of the tree line with another contingent of clones. Rin sensei shook her head and took her stance once again. Natsuko was not sure she had seen the women have to take a single step in any direction. As the clones were bursting from existence, Natsuko wondered if she could use this to advantage. Maybe she could sneak up behind and... Her eyes widened when another Naruto raced in from the opposite side of the clearing, behind Sensei's back. Rin Sensei was so intent on the clones that there was no way she could notice the new Naruto in time. Natsuko held her breath in anticipation as the orange-clad genin got closer and closer to their sensei. A hand reached out, a bell jingled, and for a small moment it seemed like Naruto had won. Not quite. Rin sensei shouted, spinning away from the genin's hand and grabbing Naruto by the back of his jacket. Sensei held him up to her eye level and smiled at him. Ah, Rin-sensei, how did you know I was there? You were loud enough to wake the dead. The blonde crossed his arms and pouted. Still, it was clever to make me think that you weren't clever. Rin-sensei said, eyes crinkling in a smile. Naruto grinned at the praise. But even with clones, you won't be able to pull this off on your own. With that, Rin-sensei spun and threw Naruto with great force. Right at the branch where Natsuko was hiding. Natsuko yelped and tried to dodge, but the genin was going way too fast. He crashed into her and sent them both sprawling to the ground. When she came to from her daze moments later, Natsuko found a stunned Naruto lying on top of her with his hands grabbing at her chest while he tried to climb off her. With a furious blush, she shoved the genin off of her and scrambled to her feet. She reached for her bow staff and swung it at the recovering Naruto. Pervert. The staff whacked off the back of Naruto's head, sending him back down to the dirt, twitching. Natsuko glared at the fallen boy. She had not hit him that hard. Your mistake was your inaction. Natsuko jerked in the direction of the voice to find Sensei almost on top of her. Before she could bring her bow up to create space, Rin-sensei lightly tapped 2 fingers against her forehead. Whispered words Natsuko could not make out, and Natsuko felt an undeniable need to sleep. She could not stop her eyelids from closing as she succumbed to sleep. Rin left the two lying just inside the wooded section of the training ground and made her way back to the center of the clearing. She was somewhat impressed by Naruto's bait and switch with his clone tactics, but it had been far too simple of a charade to catch her off guard. Natsuko's utter inaction grated on the Jonin's nerves, but she forced herself to remember just how badly she had done when she was a genin. She winced, thinking the genin should be glad that she did not know the flying thunder god technique. The faint whistling of a kunai cutting through the air put her back into battle mode. She took a quick step to the left, and the projectile sailed harmlessly by. Rin scanned the tree line for the source of the projectile, and spotted the barest of movements in the leaves. It looked like Ayano was finally ready to unleash whatever it was she had been planning. A volley of shuriken, from a different direction, caused Rin to leap to the right to avoid being shredded by the pieces of metal. The attack was quickly followed by wave after wave of shuriken and kunai, and Rin dodged every bit of metal with practiced ease, and judged which source of the weapons was an unmanned trap and which was her red-headed genin. She danced closer the edge of the clearing where the genin was positioned, each projectile aimed too far behind her to pose any real threat, and her eyes widened in realization. Ayano was either terrible at throwing weapons, or she was trying to guide Rin into this position. She got her answer a moment later when a tagged kunai landed in front of her. Rin acted immediately and was able to easily avoid the entire explosion, but she landed between a series of trees that were covered in tags. Her eyes flashed over and analyzed them in a split moment, and she smiled at her genin's plan. Got you, Ayano shouted, leaping down from the trees with her hands ready in a seal. Rin could have already used a kawarimi to get away from the tags, but wanted to see what her genin planned to do. Give me one of the bells, sensei, and I won't have to activate the tags. I told you to come at me without holding back, Ayano, Rin said without losing her smile. As a kunoichi, you have to be willing to do anything to complete a mission. So go on ahead. To her credit, Ayano hesitated for only a moment before activating the tags. Rin slammed her eyes shut and sent chakra to protect her ears as the clearing was suddenly filled by an intense light and a deafening boom. Knowing what was coming, Rin shot out a kick behind her hip holding the bells. Her foot dug into flesh and her knee absorbed all of the momentum of a charging genin taken to an abrupt stop. She let go of the chakra around her eardrums and opened her eyes to find Ayano doubled over in pain, wheezing for breath. Rin winced. Perhaps that kick had been a little rough. Using flashbang tags instead of explosive tags was an interesting idea, Rin said as she advanced on the incapacitated genin. Especially after setting up the expectation with the kunai bomb. She extended 2 fingers and placed them on the girl's forehead. Green eyes widened in fear. But with only one attacker, I could have gotten away from your barrage of weapons very easily. Or I could have used a kawarimi to get away from the tag trap without much effort. Genjutsu. Fui Sukari. Rin's chakra pulsed in the familiar jutsu, and Ayano's eyes fluttered closed. She picked the slumbering genin up and brought her to her unconscious teammates. It had taken only an hour for all 3 to be disabled, and Rin estimated they would be unconscious for another hour and a half or so. That would leave them with another 90 minutes before noon to pass the test. Ayano was clever, Naruto was stubborn, and Natsuko packed a punch. She could only hope that the three of them had understood her rather obvious clues to succeed. Naruto woke up with a blink, his eyes open to the sight of the forest canopy waving in the gentle breeze. At any other time Naruto may have appreciated the pretty sight, but the memory of how he had gotten knocked out filled him with a sense of urgency and he sat up quickly. It proved to be a mistake as he clutched the back of his throbbing head and fought the urge to throw up. "You're finally awake." Naruto opened a careful eye and saw both his teammates leaning against nearby trees. Ayano was rubbing her stomach with the occasional wince, and Natsuko was holding her left arm with her right hand. Naruto narrowed his eyes at her. "You attacked me," he accused. Natsuko glared right back at him. "You were lying on me and grabbing at me." Naruto blinked in disbelief. "We just fell from a tree. I was trying to stand up." "Stop." Ayano cut in before Natsuko could argue back again. "We only have an hour left in the test, and I don't want to fail." She tried to stand, but doubled over with a hiss of pain. "Sensei really hits hard," she muttered, clutching her stomach again. Naruto nodded his agreement with an empathetic wince. "What should we do? I mean, I didn't even get a chance to do anything before Naruto screwed up and Rin-sensei used him like a kunai to take me out." "Hey, at least I tried. You were just sitting in the tree. Idiot. I was trying to study her technique so I could find a weak point, just like Iruka-sensei said we should do." Naruto glared at her for the insult, but Ayano perked up. "Did you see anything useful?" Natsuko deflated, looking sheepish. "Not really. I didn't either. She's been toying with us." Ayano sighed and rubbed her temples. Naruto wondered if her head hurt as much as his did. "Did she say anything to you too before she knocked you out?" "Only that I should have acted," Natsuko said, kicking a rock. "Though she didn't even give me a chance like Naruto." She grumbled. "She told me that even with clones I couldn't do it on my own," Naruto said, scratching his cheek. He saw Ayano's eyes widen and Natsuko took a sharp breath. He furrowed his brow, knowing he missed something. "Rin-sensei told me that my plan wouldn't work because it was too easy to counter since there was only one attacker," Ayano said, slightly breathless. Naruto blinked, and the puzzle clicked in his head. They were supposed to work together. "It can't be that obvious," Natsuko said with a frown. "There are only 2 bells. If we team up, how do we choose who gets one? We couldn't even come close to getting them on our own, so we don't have a choice," Naruto said, stretching his aching neck with a painful pop. "We'll deal with the bell thing after we get them." "I agree with Naruto." He gave Ayano a winning grin. Natsuko looked between them and sighed. "How do we do this, then? I'm out of tags, but..." Ayano tapped her chin and hummed. "How much ninja wire do you two have?" Rin opened her eyes with a soft smile as she heard the rustling movement in the trees around her. Now was the moment of truth. Would her genin come together and pass, or fail as individuals? Rin surprised herself in hoping that they would pass. Someone made a soft landing to her left, and Rin jumped to her feet and put her most neutral expression in place. Natsuko stood in position, staff poised in a basic stance, but she was alone. Rin made a "come hither" motion, hiding her disappointment, and did not bother to take a stance. Natsuko charged in, spinning and twirling her staff in a blur of brown and green. Rin ducked and dodged the staff's swings, but Natsuko was quick in recovering from each miss. Rin soon found that, as long as she held back to a genin's general level of speed, she would be giving ground. Rin sighed, impressed at the potential she saw, but disappointed that her lesson had not sunken in. She hopped over a sweep at her legs and raised her fist to strike back at the genin. The whistling of broken air stopped Rin before she could strike and she ducked out of instinct. A kunai flew over her head, and Natsuko had enough time to recover from her overextension. Rin could not stop the smile from creeping on her face even as Natsuko resumed her attack. If Ayano was acting as range support while Natsuko was on point, that meant it was up to Naruto to get the bells. Either they had figured out the test, or they were desperate. Technically, Rin mused, either could lead them to passing if they played it right. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto's shout reverberated through the grounds as 10 of him charged out of the clearing from behind her. Rin let out a small chuckle. She changed direction and leapt away from all of her attackers, but all 11 of them responded quickly. It was Natsuko that attacked her, and the clones only moved to periodically make an attempt for the bells or to stop her from striking Natsuko when a kunai or shuriken had not already forced Rin to dodge. Still, she was picking off the clones at a decent rate, and she could see that Natsuko was tiring from the strain of keeping her staff in constant motion. When Natsuko stumbled, Rin saw her opportunity. She stepped forward to strike, ducking the expected shuriken, and she shot a fist out to take out Natsuko. Just as her fist was about to connect with the girl's face, Rin felt a pulse of chakra, and it was Naruto that she hit. Her punch caused him to burst in a cloud of smoke, and Rin had no time to be surprised as another volley of shuriken was heading her way. She leapt over the assault, mind racing. That had to have been a kawarimi, which meant that Natsuko had either been expecting it in order to not resist Naruto's chakra. Naruto, now! Ayano's shout was sudden and close. Rin looked up to find the girl in the trees above her, wire grasped in her hand. The redhead leapt down from the tree, and Rin heard the chilling, familiar sound of a ninja wire trap being sprung. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Rin snapped her head up to find at least 50 clones descending on her. With the rain of clones and the swiftly encroaching wire, Rin had nowhere to run. Luckily she did not have to. Kawarimi, she whispered, trading places with a log. She watched from a nearby tree as her genin's plan came to an end. Natsuko and Ayano each held firm on an end of ninja wire, keeping the trap in place. A pile of Naruto clones was on top of the trap and, she guessed, were supposed to retrieve the bells. Had she not been a jonin of considerable skill, Rin thought that there was a slight possibility of the plan succeeding. She was pleased. "Did you get them?" Natsuko asked through labored breaths. Rin knew that the girl had given her all, trying to force her into the proper position. "No way." Rin's grin widened at Naruto's anguished cry. The clones began popping away one by one, eventually revealing that they had been piling on top of a nondescript log. She probably enjoyed the shocked disappointment on their faces far too much. "Well done you three," she called with a kind smile. The trio snapped their heads around and looked at her with a mixture of apprehension, awe, and fear. "You pass." 3 matching expressions of dumbfounded eyes greeted her. "But, the bells?" "The bells were never the real objective," Rin explained. "The challenge was for you 3 to come together to try and achieve a common goal, despite knowing that not all of you would share the reward." Dawning recognition shined on the 3 young faces. "You can be the strongest shinobi in the world, but you won't last long if you don't have anyone at your back," Rin said, recalling the very same lecture Minato-sensei had given her and her teammates years ago. "It is teamwork that makes shinobi truly powerful. Allies can lift ninja up to places far beyond their normal potential, and give you a chance to take on enemies much stronger than yourselves. Understand?" The 3 nodded, and Rin gave them a warm smile. "Now go home and rest. We have training tomorrow at 8. With that, she used a shunshin to dash away, leaving 3 exhausted but elated genin in her wake. Hiruzen gazed over the 8 collected jonin and tried to gauge how well this meeting was going to go. The secondary genin test had a notoriously abysmal pass rate, leaving most of the new ninja to begin their careers under the care of Chunin in the genin corps. "I know it has been a tiring day for all of you, so I'll try to make this quick. Kiyomu, let's start with you. How did Team 3 fare?" The aged jonin shook his head with a sigh. "They failed quite miserably, Hokage-sama. They did not show much promise as individuals, and their teamwork was abysmal. I recommend assignment to remedial training or complete removal from the program." Hiruzen nodded with a grim frown, scratching out the 3 genin's names under the fail category. "Team 4? Fail, Hokage-sama. I recommend they never be near the shinobi world ever again." Hiruzen raised a brow at the harsh statement, but trusted his jonin's judgment. 6? They show a faint glimmer of hope, Hokage-sama, but I don't think they're ready yet. They will do well in the genin corps. Hiruzen sighed, sensing a pattern emerging. With Kakashi's infamous record, he almost did not want to ask about Team 7. "Kakashi?" The masked jonin's visible eye crinkled in a smile. "They passed." The aged Hokage blinked in surprise. He was quick to mark the children's names under pass before Kakashi could change his mind. "How did Team 8 perform, Kurenai?" "It was close," the young jonin said with a grimace. "And they have a lot to work on, but they pass." Hiruzen took a happy puff on his pipe as he scratched 3 more names in the winning column. "Asuma?" They pass with flying colors, his son answered, cigarette hanging lazily from his mouth. Hiruzen hummed his approval. They were on a roll. Hayate? What of Team 11? The sickly Jonin coughed and shook his head in the negative. Did we break even, Rin? The woman's brown eyes shined with a warmth that had been absent the week before. They passed, Hokage-sama. Hiruzen grinned around his pipe and wrote the three's names down. A 50% pass rate was much better than normal. Good, good. I will get this to the registration division as soon as possible. He put the paper aside and leaned forward, resting his chin on clasped fingers. Kakashi, Asuma, Kurenai, and Rin, please stay behind. The rest of you are dismissed. The 4 Jonin bowed and made swift exits while the remaining few settled themselves in for a longer meeting. So, the Hokage said once his office door closed. What are your first impressions of your genin? Kakashi, you start. Uchiha Sasuke is the strongest and most developed on the team, by far. Big shock, Asuma said with a snort. Kurenai shook her head and Kakashi rolled his visible eye. Rin just studied the silver-haired man with a frown. His reputation as a genius is correct, but I worry about what drives him. Kakashi chose not to elaborate. Yamanaka Ino and Haruno Sakura are much less advanced, and are constantly at each other's throats. Hiruzen raised a questioning brow. But they each show promise, and they performed better when trying to outdo the other. Being on the same team as Sasuke seems to motivate them. Playing them off of each other could be a dangerous game, Kakashi. The masked man shrugged, nonchalant. Hiruzen took that as a sign that he was already well aware of the risks. He shifted his gaze to the striking, red eyes of his newest Jonin. Kurenai? Aburame Shino already has an impressive mastery over his clan's techniques, but he lacks a variety of other skills to accentuate that strength. He's a quick thinker and a budding strategist, but he's also standoffish and slow to trust his teammates. Hyuga Hinata has an amazing amount of potential, she said with a frustrated grind of her teeth. If she ever gets out of her own head. She is hesitant, lacks self-confidence, and is too quiet to add to team discussions. Kurenai let loose a heavy sigh. Hiruzen suspected that the girl's apparent meek demeanor grated against Kurenai's driven nature. Still, she has a good foundation in the Jukin, and has a remarkable amount of chakra control for a genin. Shimizu Toru is the roughest of the three. He is below average in genjutsu and taijutsu, but he has a knack for using ninja tools in creative ways. Her left hand stroked her opposite shoulder with a wince. He really likes explosions. Your genin managed to hit you, Kurenai? Asuma asked with a laugh. Kurenai looked at him with narrowed eyes that had Hiruzen's son holding up his hands in a placating manner. Thank you for the detailed report, Hiruzen interrupted before they could begin arguing. What about your genin, Asuma? Shikamaru's a closet genius. Choji probably already has more raw strength than most Chunin, and Kiba is a loudmouth with a knack for beat-down taijutsu. Hiruzen waited for elaboration, but his son just puffed on his cigarette with his arms resting behind his head. The aged Hokage shook his head. He only hoped that Asuma's easygoing laziness did not rub off on his genin. Rin? The med nin sat up to attention, having drifted off into her own world. There's definitely potential here, Hokage-sama. Takawa Nitsuko has a surprising amount of skill with her bow staff. Though, her stamina and technique can use some improvement. She seems to have a weakness for genjutsu, and is quick to anger, but both can be improved on with time. Kofuku Ayano shows some potential as a strategist and with projectile weaponry, but is also susceptible to genjutsu. I also did not have a chance to test her taijutsu or ninjutsu, which leads me to believe that she favors neither. Uzumaki Naruto is stubborn and somewhat of a loudmouth, but he has the best stamina I have ever seen in a genin. He showed some brief tactical ability and a determination to improve himself. I suspect he has a talent for using ninjutsu in unique ways, as I've never seen anyone use a cage bunshin in the way he does. Combined with his chakra, I think he has the potential to be an amazing ninjutsu specialist. The other 3 Jonin looked to her in surprise, likely having read the scouting report on each of the class genin, but Hiruzen did not give them time to question Rin. Good. It sounds like we should expect a lot from this year's rookies. Now, you should all go home and get some rest. I assume you have students to teach in the morning, and I must impress just how exhausting that can be. Dismissed. Kurenai and Asuma wasted no time in vacating his office, but Rin stayed back. Kakashi hovered just outside the door, a concerned black eye studying his former teammate. "Hokage-sama, I just wanted to say thank you," Rin said, bowing her head. Hiruzen smiled and nodded, here warming. "I think you may have been right. I am glad to hear it." The woman bowed fully, turned on her heel, and strode out of his office. She had not even paused to glance at Kakashi. The silver-haired Jonin shot him a questioning glance, but Hiruzen just shrugged and lit his freshly stuffed pipe. It would be an interesting year. Ayano hummed a tune as she stepped out of her room ready for her first official day of shinobi training. She tightened the strap of her kunai holster as she took the stairs 2 at a time. The familiar bustling sound of the rest of her family preparing the restaurant for the day reached her as she stepped onto the landing, and she tiptoed her way toward the side door. Hopefully nobody would. "Ayat-chan, come back here and help prep for the morning rush," her mother called. Ayano froze in her tracks, bristling at the nickname. She grimaced and turned on her heel, giving her would-be captor her best glare. The woman, sporting her usual hostess dress with her auburn hair done up in an elaborate bun, was tapping her foot with a delicate, raised brow. "I can't. I have training today." The older redhead's foot stopped tapping and her hands landed on her hips. Ayano braced herself for the usual scolding. "Young lady, your father and I have put up with your childish dream for years now. We let you go to that school and play at being a ninja as long as you remembered that the restaurant always comes first. It's not often that we ask you for help." Ayano held back a snort. She had nearly failed the academy every year due to how often she was late. The amount of extra credit she had to do to pass still made her shudder in fear. "But when we do, I expect you listen to me." "I can't." Ayano put as much force into the word as she could. Her mother looked taken aback. "I'm a full-fledged genin now. I can't blow off training like I used to do with school." "You graduated?" the older woman asked, blinking in surprise. "When?" "A couple days ago." She forced herself to ignore the pang of hurt. "I have responsibilities now." "You have responsibilities here." Ayano took a shuddering breath. She would not lose her cool right now. "If I ignore my training, I could wind up hurt. Or dead." Ayano felt a guilty sense of satisfaction as her mother paled. "That's if they don't kick me out of the program first." "Did I?" Ayano gave a grave nod. "Then it's definitely time you withdrew from the program and focused on your training here." Her mother turned to go back onto the restaurant floor. "Honestly, we all thought you'd give up before you got this far." Ayano stood there, stunned. As much as she wished it did not, her family's lack of support hurt. Before her saboteur could turn around to make sure she was following, Ayano bolted out of the building. She held back the tears with a vicious snarl as she weaved through Konoha's crowded streets. She was a ninja now, she had to be strong. "Morning." Natsuko called into the kitchen, bright and chipper. Rather than the normal chorus of greetings, silence met her. She studied the abandoned room with a frown, but the smell of a freshly cooked breakfast distracted her. She bolted to the table, finding a steaming plate of breakfast pastries on top of a folded paper. She nibbled on one of her mother's pastries and scanned what turned out to be a note from her father. Her parents and brother had apparently been called out on an emergency tracking mission. She shrugged at the note, used to her family's hectic schedule, and grabbed another pastry from the plate. If there was nobody here to talk to, there was no use sticking around. She secured her staff to her back and was out the door within minutes. Better early than late, I guess. She was not sure what to expect from real ninja training, but, after yesterday, she was sure it was going to be tougher than anything she had ever done before. A flutter of excitement filled her chest, and Natsuko put an extra spring in her step. Rin-sensei was so strong. She had never really seen how powerful a kunoichi could be before, and the Jonin's performance had been an eye-opener. For once, Natsuko felt the desire to improve her skills, rather than just go with the flow as she normally did. She took a breath and shut her eyes without missing a step. She reached out with her chakra and tried to feel the world around her. It was a familiar exercise now, after a year of repeated practice. Her family was made up of sensor-type ninjas, but none of them were lucky enough to be born with the talent already perfect. Natsuko bobbed and weaved through the foot traffic in the streets with an ease that had taken months to master. For the most part, she could not get a sense of individual chakra, but she could feel that something was around her. Makoto had promised that it just took practice to get more refined, and her brother never lied to her. What she did feel made her smile, though. Most of the people of Konoha gave off a warm, welcoming feeling that always made her feel at home. There was an occasional cold and dark presence, but she never managed to pinpoint who it was. "Hey, Natsuko, why are you walking around with your eyes closed?" She jolted to a sudden stop as a presence dropped down right in front of her. She opened her eyes to be blinded by orange. "I was practicing my family jutsu," she said in a clipped tone. The class idiot was her teammate now, and so she would be civil. She did not have to like him, though. "Your family has special jutsus? I didn't know you were from a clan." Natsuko rolled her eyes. The Takawas were far too small to be an official ninja clan. He would have known that, if he ever paid attention in class. Not for the first time, Natsuko wished she had been as lucky as Sakura and Ino with her team placement. "We're not a clan, but everyone in my family is a sensor ninja." She closed her eyes and started walking toward training ground 12. "Cool," Naruto said as she felt him fall into step with her. "What's a sensor ninja?" he asked a few seconds later, causing her to trip over her own feet. "Baka, don't you know anything?" She snapped her eyes open to find Naruto frowning with his arms crossed, looking hurt. She sighed, feeling a pang of guilt, and ran a hand through her dark hair. "A sensor can feel others' chakra. Everyone has it, even civilians, so it's really useful for finding people. So if I hid somewhere in the village," Naruto said, brightening back up, "you would be able to find me?" "Well," Natsuko replied with a sheepish smile. "I'm not that good yet. But yeah, someday I'll be able to." "Sounds really useful." Natsuko nodded and a silence fell between them as they neared the training ground. With her eyes open, she noticed that people were giving them a wide berth while casting odd looks toward the orange-clad genin. She spared a glance to her teammate, but he wore a serene smile. "Be careful around that boy, Natsuko," her father's words echoed. "Nothing good will come from him." She furrowed her brow in thought. She could not reconcile her father's warnings and the people's wariness with the blonde idiot. Something did not add up. "Hello." Natsuko turned to find her other teammate coming from a side street. Ayano waved at them with a small smile, but her eyes were pink and slightly puffy. Naruto returned an enthusiastic wave, either not noticing or not caring that she had been crying. Natsuko frowned, but chose not to comment. "You three are early? Good." All three of them turned to see their sensei drop down from the roofs above, arms full with scrolls. The woman gave them a kind smile. "I hope you're all eager, because your serious training starts today." "You better believe it, sensei. I'm ready for anything." Natsuko winced as Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs. Ayano also took a surprised step back, but Rin-sensei only ruffled Naruto's hair without losing her smile. "Glad to hear it, come on." She waved them to follow her, and they swiftly obeyed. "This morning we'll begin with something really intense." Natsuko shared a look with her teammates and saw eagerness in their eyes that matched her own. She had to grin. "Thought exercises?" Naruto asked with no small amount of dismay. Rin forced down a laugh at her genin's crestfallen faces. It really was unfair of her to lead them on like that, but it was just too much fun. "Yes, Naruto, thought exercises." She sat in the grass and spread out one of the scrolls in front of her. The genin all sat in front of her and peered at the diagram on the scroll. "As a shinobi," she said, switching to her lecturing tone, "you will always have to keep your mind sharp. A ninja that doesn't use their head is a dead ninja. Worse, they get others killed." She tapped the scroll in front of her, pointing at 4 figures in the center. "This is a diagram showing a possible scenario you can come across during a mission. Inside a large, well-lit warehouse, 3 enemy ninja are holding an important hostage at Kunai Point. The goal of your mission is to retrieve the hostage safely at any cost." She shifted her finger to indicate 3 different figures on the roof of the warehouse. "These are you 3. The warehouse itself is 2 stories tall, with windows lining the upper floor. There is also a hatch on the roof. The second floor is nothing more than a series of crisscrossing walkways. The enemy nin and hostage are in the middle of the ground floor. How do you save the hostage?" Her genin looked to her, at each other, and then studied the scroll. Rin closed her eyes and took a meditative breath. It would probably take them a few minutes to come up with a solution. Naruto's enthusiastic voice came a second later. "That's easy, Rin-sensei." She opened her eyes and saw him grinning. "We bust in and take them out and get the hostage out of there." Rin sighed. The enemies kill the hostage as soon as they hear you enter the building. Mission failed, try again. You never said they'd do that. The blonde accused with a pout. His teammates just shook their heads and looked back to the scroll. Always take into account the worst-case scenario, Naruto. When a group is holding someone hostage, always think that they would rather have that person dead than to be rescued. Try again. The blonde boy huffed, but looked back to the scroll. A ranged attack, Ayano then said, her eyebrows furrowed over swollen eyes. Rin made a mental note to keep an eye on the girl's mentality. Go on. The redhead perked up at not being outright rejected. Well, she chewed her lip. We'd have to sneak in unnoticed, and then each of us could take out one of the enemies with a kunai or shuriken. Rin gave the girl a small smile. Not the worst plan. Ayano's face brightened. But you would have to make sure each strike takes out opponent, and at the same time. If any of the kunai miss, or take a split second longer to strike, then the hostage is dead and your mission failed. Low chance of success, try again. Rin closed her eyes and breathed in the fresh morning air. She heard her genin start muttering to each other and grinned. They did not have to be told to work together today, which she counted as progress. The problem she set for them would not be overly difficult, but they would have to think. At least a little. A distraction. This time it was Natsuko who spoke. The brunette pointed to a spot just outside the warehouse. That will get at least one of them to come investigate. Ayano took over. As soon as they're out the door, we kick their ass. Rin laughed as the two girls grimaced at Naruto's outburst. We take them out, Ayano said with a sidelong look to Naruto. And one of us uses the henge to take their form and call for more help. Meanwhile, one of us would have snuck into the rafters using the roof hatch or the windows. So when it's down to only one person left, someone just has to not miss with a kunai. Naruto finished with a wide grin. A divide and conquer strategy, not bad. Rin smiled. A decent chance of success. Good job. Her genin beamed with pride, and she unraveled the next scroll. Next up is a guarding type mission. She held back a laugh at the near inaudible sighs from the kids. They would get used to it. You're relying too much on your clones. Rin shouted as she ducked another kick from behind. One sweep of her leg behind her was followed by a series of 7 bursts as shadow clones dispersed. Come at me on your own if you want to improve. Naruto, who was already halfway through his hand seals, grimaced and charged her. Rin frowned as the orange-clad boy came at her with wild, unrefined attacks. He did not use the Academy Taijutsu, but rather an unorthodox brawling style. While it was less predictable than the Academy Taijutsu, Rin knew that it also had a lower ceiling of skill. He was limiting himself by using a form best left to civilians. After another wild swing, Rin decided she had seen enough. She caught his follow-up kick in a tight grip and spun. Naruto yelped in surprise as he was picked up and tossed through the air, right at his resting teammates. Her other 2 students squawked and scrambled to get out of the way, but were too slow. Rin smirked while they tried to disentangle themselves from each other. It was the little things that made a day fun, really. Good news and bad news, she said to the kids once they stopped grumbling. Bad news. You all have a long, long way to go before you'll be respectable in taijutsu. All 3 hung their heads at the blunt denial of their skill. Good news is that I can see each of you has a lot of potential. She glanced to the sky and saw the sun high in center. We'll work on it tomorrow morning, but for now go and get some lunch. She finished with a smile. The 3 genin picked themselves off the ground and stretched. Rin eyed each of them with a critical gaze. Ayano was the worst off of the trio in terms of stamina, and Rin suspected she had the smallest chakra reserves. Her taijutsu was average, and did not waver from the academy style, but Rin assumed, by what she saw yesterday, that the girl was more of a ranged fighter anyway. Still, they would work on it. Natsuko had a natural grace about her with her staff, and was not much worse off when disarmed. Her style used more spins and flexibility than Rin was used to, but the Jonin thought her style was still rough. Her eyes shifted to her 3rd genin. Naruto, stay back for a few minutes. The blonde boy shrugged and trudged back over to her while the girls continued on the path that would take them out of the clearing that served as their training ground. What's up, Rin-sensei? You don't use the academy-style taijutsu. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Nope. Why? I'm sure Amino-san would have preferred you to use it. It was boring. Rin gave him an incredulous look, but he was oblivious. Besides, Mizuki Teme never cared what I fought like. Rin pressed 2 fingers against her forehead. Of course Mizuki would not put full effort into teaching his students. I was always near the top in taijutsu, though. Near? Who would beat you? Rin could practically feel her opening. Naruto tapped his chin, eyes cast upwards. Sasuke Teme, Kiba, and Hinata sometimes. He trailed off for a moment before getting a look of defensiveness. But they didn't use the academy style either. That's because they have their own family styles to learn. A fleeting image of Obito fighting passed through her mind. But I can guarantee you that they each mastered the academy jutsu as well. So? Naruto asked with his arms crossed. It's not like the use at all. Every single fighting style can trace itself back to the basic academy forms. Naruto frowned. You have to master the basics before you can learn the cool stuff, Naruto muttered with a look of dawning realization. Rin raised a curious brow. That's right. Where'd you hear that? It was something Iruka-sensei told me when I had trouble controlling my chakra. Good advice. She placed a hand on the short boy's head and ruffled his hair. I'm not saying you're doing anything wrong, Naruto. You just need to take a step back and get a solid foundation. He nodded beneath her hand. Then I can kick anyone's ass, yeah? Rin giggled at his blunt enthusiasm. As long as you train hard, anything is possible. She poked his head and took the most basic form of the academy style. Now, match my movements. Her student complied. So where do you want to go to eat? Natsuko asked as she and Ayano trekked away from the wood's edge. The redhead shrugged. Wherever. Natsuko squinted her eyes at the girl. Don't you ever have an opinion about something? The redhead looked to her and opened her mouth to say something, but hesitated. Ayano snapped her mouth shut and focused on the ground, and Natsuko bit her lip with a sudden rush of guilt. Sorry, she said with a sigh. How about the curry place? I haven't eaten there before. No. Natsuko's breath hitched in a brief moment of fright from the quiet girl's sudden shout. The redhead closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. Anywhere else? Please? How's the barbecue, then? Natsuko asked. She wanted to ask what the taller girl's reaction was about, but she did not know Ayano well enough to pry. Sure. Ayano replied with a neutral expression, calming down. Natsuko counted the fact that the girl calmed down as a small win. She figured she would have to take what she could get. They were quick in weaving through the Konoha foot traffic, and, when they were approaching the restaurant, Natsuko spotted 3 familiar faces. Ino-chan, Sakura-chan, Sasuke-kun, she called out, grabbing Ayano's hand and rushing over to her former classmates. The 3 were being led by a white-haired man who wore a Jonin flak jacket and his hite-ate at an angle to cover his left eye, with his hair set at a gravity-defying upward angle towards the right. Natsuko skidded to a halt in front of the quartet and let go of Ayano's hand. The redhead was blushing and straightening her shirt with slight frown. She shrugged and focused on her friends. Ino and Sakura were glaring at each other with raised fists, while Sasuke-kun watched with a mix of annoyance and tiredness. Guys? 2 of Rin's kids, The Jonin said in a lazy drawl, never taking his eye off his bright orange book. The 2 girls stopped glaring at each other and finally noticed Natsuko and Ayano. Their eyes lit up. Natsuko-chan, they both said, and Ino engulfed her into a hug. It had only been 2 days, but after seeing each other every day for 4 years, that was practically an eternity. Finally, someone to talk to other than Billboard Brow, Ino whispered in her ear. Natsuko let out an uncomfortable chuckle at that. She had no idea why the 2 girls seemed to hate other so much, but often chose to spend most of their time together. It did not make any sense. As if you're any better, Ino pig. Just like that the 2 were forehead to forehead, giving each other heated glares. Natsuko rolled her eyes at the familiar antics and turned to Sasuke-kun, who had turned to gaze at the clouds. She stepped into his line of sight with a cheery grin. Hey Sasuke-kun, how's life as a genin? I bet you've already gotten super strong. Sasuke looked at her with those deep, black eyes that hid so much, and frowned. He glancing over to his teammates. His jaw tightened and he turned away from all of them to glare at the sky. Natsuko's face fell. Not well, then, she muttered to herself. The boy's dismissal of her was familiar, and did not sting as much as it used to. Sasuke never opened up to anyone. How are things with your team, then? Sakura asked. Ino was pouting with her arms crossed, which meant that Sakura had gotten the last word this time. Natsuko shrugged. It's not that bad. Naruto's not as annoying as I thought he would be. Sakura and Ino looked skeptical at that. And Ayano. Natsuko gave a start, having completely forgotten about her teammate's presence. With a guilty blush, she turned to apologize to the redhead. Natsuko's eyebrow rose in surprise when she saw Ayano and the Jonin having an intense, whispered conversation. Ayano is odd, but nice enough, Natsuko finished, turning back to the girls. She was always quiet in class. Ino noted. Kakashi-sensei seems to like her. Kakashi-sensei likes weird things. Sakura countered. Ino nodded in agreement. Natsuko felt a pang of guilt for talking about her teammate like this. You guys are so lucky, though, she said, changing the subject. What's it like being on a team with Sasuke-kun? Instead of the over-the-top excitement she expected, both girls adopted a look of frustration. It would be a lot better if Ino Pig wasn't holding us back. The blonde scoffed, and turned on the pink-haired girl with her hands on her hips. If I wasn't holding you back, she looked livid. You're the reason we failed the bell test. Sakura's eye twitched. You missed with your mind jutsu thing and left me wide open. She countered. I missed because your trap was in the wrong place. It was not. Kakashi-sensei just fell into it from a weird angle. Natsuko looked between each one as they argued back and forth. It was like watching an awkward tennis match. So now it's Sasuke-kun's fault? I never said that. Enough, you two. Kakashi's bored voice interrupted him. The Jonin was slouched, with his hands in his pockets. He gave off nothing but a lazy vibe. Natsuko frowned at his apparent indifference. You can't put the blame on just one of you, it was a team effort. Understand? Yes, sensei. The two girls replied, heads bowed. Kakashi smiled beneath his mask. Besides, he said in a jovial tone. You all sucked. Sakura's jaw dropped, Ino squawked, and Sasuke growled at the rebuke. But you'll get better. Now, I have to stop at the bookstore and pick up a newest Icha before we start training again. You kids go on without me. I thought that's why you were late this morning. Sakura accused him with narrowed eyes. Kakashi shrugged and sped through a few hand seals before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Natsuko frowned. Did all Jonin use the shunshin for dramatic exits? We only have a half hour before we have to be back, Natsuko. Ayano's quiet voice surprised Natsuko. How had she forgotten the girl was there? Again, right, she muttered. Let's stop somewhere quick then, yeah? The four girls set off to find a good place, with Sasuke trailing behind at a reluctant pace. You'll have to do better than that, Baka. Ayano and Natsuko stood at the entrance to Training Ground 12 with their jaws slack. There were 30 Narutos beating each other senseless under Rin Sensei's amused eye. You can't talk to me like that. I'm the original. Oh yeah? The other blur of orange yelled back. No wonder you ended up dead last. The original let out a roar of rage and delivered a vicious kick to the clone's side, dispelling it in a puff of smoke. Naruto winced in pain, clutching his side in the same spot that he had kicked the clone. Shouldn't have hit it so hard. He grunted and went back into the fray. Rin-sensei? Ayano was more than a little confused over what was going on. After a half hour of listening to Ino and Sakura prattle on about Sasuke, her head was already starting to hurt. Seeing her other teammate doing his best to kick his own ass was enough to push it to a full-blown headache. Oh, hello girls, the Jonin said with a bright smile. I was just giving Naruto some tips on his taijutsu. Disperse. The sudden shout at the end caused both Ayano and Natsuko to wince, and Naruto instantly dispelled the remainder of his clones. When the smoke cleared, he was clutching his head with a wide grimace. Too much at once. He whined with his eyes jammed shut. I did warn you, Sensei said with a sigh. Why was Naruto fighting himself? Natsuko asked, leaning on her staff. Rin Sensei and Naruto gave each other a knowing glance, and Naruto broke out a wide grin. We discovered that Naruto has a unique ability. Rin Sensei explained. He's perhaps the first person that can use shadow clones without worrying about chakra exhaustion. Ayano frowned and thought. So the blonde had a lot of chakra. It was not completely unheard of. I can use my clones to learn stuff. Naruto supplied with a happy shout. How? The shadow clone is not like a normal bunshin, Natsuko. Ayano gave her sensei her full attention. The Jonin was using her lecturing voice again. They were developed as a means of gathering intelligence. When they are destroyed or dispelled, whatever they learned is transferred back to the original. Ayano's eyes widened and her heart sped up in excitement at the realization of what the shadow clones were capable of. "You have to teach us that jutsu, sensei," she demanded. The possibility of speedy learning was like a dream come true. With it, she could become strong, and show everyone that she could accomplish her dreams. "Absolutely not," Rin Sensei said with a stern edge. The excitement shattered and left a deep pit of disappointment in Ayano's stomach. "Why not? It sounds like it could make training easier." Natsuko's whiny objection echoed Ayano's thoughts. "Because it is a forbidden jutsu for a reason." Rin Sense planted her hands on her hips and gave them a no-nonsense look. "It takes an incredible amount of chakra to perform in the first place, and then it cuts your chakra in half." Ayano wilted at that, knowing exactly what would happen if she were to try to use it. "If you do not have the reserves for it, attempting the cage bunshin would kill you." She pointed to Naruto. "He is extremely lucky that he has unusually high chakra reserves, or he would be dead right now." Ayano gained a bit of satisfaction from seeing Naruto's face turn pale. "That being said, once I am confident you two have the reserves to pull it off, I will gladly teach you." Ayano felt a bit better at that. At least it was something. Now, to further that goal and, she pointed to Naruto. "To help you control chakra better than a 3-year-old. Hey," he shouted, then pouted. Ayano could not stop herself and giggled at his expression. Natsuko's chiming laughter filled the training grounds as well. "We will be doing extremely important training this afternoon." All three of them stood at full attention. "You're going to learn how to climb trees," she said, as if it was going to be the most exciting thing in the world. Ayano slumped to the ground, deciding that Rin Sensei was evil incarnate. "Eh? What's climbing trees have to do with training?" Naruto asked in his loud, whiny voice. "Oh, you'll find out," Rin Sensei said with a grin that sent a chill up Ayano's spine. She sighed and picked herself off the ground. At least if they got through Sensei's idea of training they could start missions. It was something to look forward to, she supposed. "I hate these missions," Ayano yelled in utter annoyance. Naruto looked to his teammate with a tired grin. Her normally neat hair was frizzy and flying in every direction, her clothes were torn, and she was covered in scratches. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, knowing he did not look much better. "They aren't that bad," Natsuko countered. She was carrying a fat, purring cat and looked no worse for wear. Naruto glared at the demon beast, a cut on his leg echoing in a stinging pain. How that thing escaped its master every week, without fail, was beyond him. "That's because you didn't do anything." Ayano had a savage glint in her eye. Naruto had long since learned to stop pushing the tall redhead's buttons when she got that look. "I do plenty," Natsuko defended herself. She flicked her hair over a shoulder. "Besides, someone's got to look good for us." Ayano's eye twitched and Naruto looked up to the sky with his hands clasped behind his head. It looked like they were heading for another argument. "They sure did that a lot. It's the only thing you're good for," Ayano accused with a growl. Natsuko halted to an abrupt stop, and the cat took the chance to jump free. Naruto leapt after the beast, capturing it by its tail. He clutched the cat to his chest even as it tried its best to scratch his face off. He agreed with Ayano. These D-rank missions really sucked. "Want to say that again?" Natsuko asked in a sweet tone, but her knuckles were white while they gripped her staff. Naruto looked to Rin Sensei, but she just shook her head. "Let them get it out of their systems," she had told him. "They'll be better off for it." Naruto did not like it, but he would follow his sensei's orders. "You heard me," Ayano replied, not backing down. Natsuko narrowed her eyes at the girl before turning on her heel and striding towards the Hokage Tower. "Naruto, tell our teammate that just because some people don't care what they look like, nobody should." Naruto said, struggling to keep the demon in his arms. "Naruto," Ayano said in her dry tone. "Tell her that just because she doesn't want to take being a ninja seriously doesn't mean that the rest of us don't." Naruto looked back and forth between his teammates. Honestly, how was he supposed to deal with these types of situations? It was not like he had much experience with this type of thing. "Girls, stop putting Naruto in the middle of your arguments." Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. "Sensei to the rescue." She started it. They both accused at the same time. They all stopped for a moment as Natsuko and Ayano glared at each other before Rin Sensei pushed them on. "Honestly, you two," Rin Sensei said in a long-suffering tone as she pushed them along. You've been teammates for a month now. Naruto narrowed his eyes at his sensei. So much for staying out of it. Ayano and Natsuko both bowed their heads, and the four of them continued in silence. They shuffled into the Hokage Tower, dodging around the bustling Chunin and Jonin. It was a familiar practice after 3 weeks of doing missions. Naruto scoffed at the idea that the chores the Hokage kept assigning them were actual missions, but that was all the old man would offer them. Naruto followed Rin Sensei into the familiar mission room. A long table was positioned in the center of the room, where the old man and a bunch of Chunin gave out missions and payments. Despite the squirming cat in his arms, Naruto smiled. For what it was worth, the missions to catch the demon beast paid more than the average D rank. More money meant more food, and more food meant better training. Team 12 reporting mission success, Sandame-sama. Rin Sensei announced, standing rigid with her hands clasped behind her back. The old man looked up from his papers with a kind smile, smoke rising from his pipe. He removed the worn wood from his mouth and prepared to say something, but a loud squeal interrupted him. Tora, oh you naughty kitty, come to mommy. Naruto felt a brief moment of pity for the cat as a rotund woman snatched it from his arms. The thing howled in horror as the woman squeezed it into her ample chest. No wonder it always tried to escape. Oh thank you kids. You always get Tora back to me, safe and sound. The woman turned and waved to the old man. Until next time, Sarutobi-san, Iruka-kun. Naruto perked up at the second name, and only then noticed that the Chunin at the old man's side was the academy teacher. The scarred man looked like he did after one of Naruto's more thorough pranks. It's been a pleasure, ma'am, he said in a tone that hid any tiredness. With that, the woman giggled and slipped from the room. Her cat's yowling echoed behind her. Well, the old man said after a long moment. I believe this makes 38 successful D ranks completed for Team 12. He glanced to Iruka-sensei, who checked a piece of paper before nodding. An impressive record for 3 weeks. Naruto resisted the urge to roll his eyes. Doing 2 of those a day was not something he thought of as impressive. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Rin said, giving all 3 of them a look. They all immediately echoed her. They had been fast to learn that when Rin Sensei went into ninja mode, you did not argue with her. Naruto was still unnerved at how fast Rin Sensei could go from happy and cheerful to cold and efficient. Even for a shinobi, that had to be weird, didn't it? The old man had a twinkling of amusement in his eye. The praise is well deserved. Now, what shall you take for your second mission of the day? The construction aid and office work missions available. Ayano and Natsuko groaned at hearing that, and Naruto could not help himself. Ah, come on old man. Give us a real mission, none of this babysitting and cat-catching crap. His teammates gave him the slightly odd looks he normally got whenever someone heard him talk to the old man, but Naruto could feel his sensei staring into the back of his head. He did not want to risk looking at her and losing his nerve. I mean, we've been doing things like this for a month. We can handle whatever you throw at us. Right Ayano? Natsuko? The girls glanced at each other, to their sensei, and then to floor. Iruka-sensei was shaking his head, face planted in his palm. Naruto gave them a weak glare as he felt the cold sting of betrayal settle in his stomach. Well, we do have a C rank or 2 lying around. The old man rested his chin on laced fingers, a small smile playing on his lips. Naruto felt a spark of victorious hope. Hokage-sama, you can't be serious? Iruka-sensei said in complete disbelief. Naruto set his jaw against the fact that his former sensei did not appear to believe in the skills. They're only fresh graduates. The Hokage hummed, eyes not leaving where Rin Sensei stood. Thank you, Amino-san, but these are my genin now, not your students. It is up to me to decide whether or not they are ready. Naruto looked to his sensei for the first time since his outburst, a happy smile ready to break out on his face. He stopped short when he saw her though. When had she turned so pale? Rin Sensei's kind brown eyes locked onto his. But you're right, they are not ready to go out on C-rank missions yet. Naruto deflated, knowing by Rin Sensei's tone that he would have no chance to argue further. I see, the old man said, shuffling through a pile of paperwork. In that case, I think I have a D rank in mind for you. Naruto held back a sigh, knowing it would only get him in trouble. I can't believe you talked to the Hokage like that. Natsuko whispered as she and her teammates followed Rin-sensei toward their mission. Naruto grumbled something she could not make out and shifted the stack of paperwork in his hands. Now we probably won't get to go out of the village for another month. Sakura-chan and Ino-chan mentioned they were going to go out on one soon, too. Now we'll fall behind. How could she ever have a chance to impress Sasuke-kun if her two biggest rivals outperformed her? Once again, she lamented the fact that she was not on the last Uchiha's team. I had to try, Naruto whined. We don't do anything important. We're ninja, we're supposed to be saving the world and stuff. Natsuko shook her head. Where did he come up with this stuff? We all have to start somewhere, Ayano said with a frown. All the jonin in the bingo books have done hundreds or thousands of D ranks. Naruto groaned at that implication. You complain about them more than he does, Natsuko reminded the redhead. The girl just shrugged in her usual way. It was a habit that irked Natsuko to no end. Do you three know which way you're going? Rin-sensei's cheerful voice interrupted them. Natsuko was relieved that whatever had made her sensei act so weird in the tower seemed to have passed. Yes, Rin-sensei, the three of them chorused. It was odd how quickly these habits developed over the last month, Natsuko mused. Then again, with her family still out on a mission, she had spent most of her waking hours in the company of these two. Once we make it to the main gate, I'll leave you three to it. The jonin told them. Their mission was to distribute a new set of orders to the chunin guarding the gates. It was not a vital priority, but it needed to be done. That was a pattern she had noticed with the D ranks. The open main gate of Konoha soon towered over them, and Natsuko could not help but stare at the sight. She had never been so close to the edge of the village before, and had no idea what to expect. The gate was at least the size of the Hokage's tower, with a bunch of intricate designs carved into the wood. The forests of Hai no Kuni sprawled out just beyond the protective barrier, making the outside world look like a sea of green. Afternoon, Jonin Senpai, one of the chunin said with a wide yawn. Natsuko raised a brow. Just two chunin to guard the massive gate? Seemed like it should have been more. Anything we can help you with? Rin-sensei gave the three genin a glance, and Naruto was the first to step forward. The old man gave us your new orders, the blonde said, tossing a stack of papers onto the chunin's desk. Natsuko sighed and heard Ayano palm her face. Leave it to Naruto to completely forget about formality. The old man? Is that any way to talk about the Hokage, brat? The sleepy chunin chastised. Naruto gave a shrug that could rival Ayano. Now listen here. Whatever, we've got more of the old man's orders to give out. Naruto said with a wave of dismissal. The chunin both spluttered, but Rin-sensei just shook her head. It was just another average day for Team 12. Out of the way, everyone snapped their attention to an Anbu operative barreling through the gate. Natsuko could make out more figures approaching a short distance away. The chunin guards looked taken aback. Apparently they had been too distracted by Naruto. We've got injured. How serious? Rin-sensei asked in a businesslike tone. Pretty bad, Nohara-san, the masked Anbu admitted. The panicked tone was at odds with the emotionless lion mask he wore. They were in pursuit of an A- class escapee, and got caught unaware. 2 dead, 2 seriously injured, and the rest are wounded. Natsuko shared a worried glance with her teammates. They all knew about the more dangerous aspects of the shinobi life, but they had not come face to face with it yet. Understood. Rin-sensei turned to them and gave them her best. Do what I say. Look. You three are going to finish your mission and then take the afternoon off. Understood? Natsuko was going to voice her assent when she caught sight of the person leading the group back. Meiko ni, she called, running to her older brother. The boy's normal smile and confidant aura were nowhere to be found. Instead, his eyes were puffy, his arm was in a sling, and he looked exhausted. When he caught sight of her, his face fell. Natsuko felt a pit of dread settle into her stomach. Natsu-chan? She felt her heart pounding against her chest hard enough to make her lose her breath. Where are mom and dad? He trailed off, looking after the Anbu that were racing toward Konoha General Hospital with a pained expression. It doesn't look good. The world froze for a long second and Natsuko could not catch a breath. Makoto's words just would not register. Without thinking about it, she dropped the stupid and useless paperwork to the ground, and raced off after her parents. Wetness slid down her cheeks as she ran, and she barely registered her brother and team falling in step behind her. Her parents would be alright. They had to be alright. Ayano stood to the side of the hospital room, feeling helpless. Nurses and medical ninja bustled around the emergency ward, and Ayano had the distinct feeling that she and Naruto were not supposed to be there, but Rin-sensei had told them to stay put. Ayano kept her eyes locked on the two beds closest to the entrance. Rin-sensei was leaning over one, while a bearded Jonin was over the other. Their hands glowed green and sweat dripped from their brows. Ayano had never seen Rin-sensei look so focused before. Naruto fidgeted beside her. She spared the excitable blonde a glance and saw that he looked as uncomfortable and out of place as she felt. A small sob drew her attention back to the beds. Natsuko was crying and clutching to her equally teary-eyed older brother, but her watery eyes were locked on the people unconscious on the beds. Ayano grimaced. Ever since they became a team, Ayano had often wanted to wipe the grin off the overconfident girl's face, but seeing her look so broken at that moment made Ayano feel petty and childish. Nobody deserved to watch their parents in the condition Natsuko's were in. "I think we're in the clear here," the bearded medical ninja said in an exhausted whisper. Natsuko sobbed in relief, and Ayano saw the bedridden woman's chest rise and fall at an even pace beneath the man's hands. The redhead was sure that Natsuko's mother had not been breathing when they had burst in the room. "Then I can use your help, Iyasa-san." Rin-sensei's tone was calm, but short. Her kind brown eyes were locked onto her patient's leg. Ayano's stomach churned at the sight of the crushed limb. "The bones are completely shattered," she muttered. Iyasa spun on his heel, green aura sinking into Natsuko's father. "There's no way we can save this," he said a moment later, eyes scrunched in effort. Rin-sensei shook her head. "There's a chance, but—" Rin-sensei grimaced as the green aura around her hands flickered. "My chakra's starting to run low." The aura flickered again, and Rin-sensei stumbled. "You're at your limit, Rin-senpai." Rin-sensei growled at the man's declaration. "I can handle this if we amputate. There will be much less risk," and Natsuko and her brother cried their protest, interrupting him. "Naruto, get over here." Rin-sensei's tone brooked no arguments, and Naruto raced over to their sensei. "Place your hand on the small of my back," she said, with a determined glint in her eye. "You had to be kidding." Iyasa argued as Naruto placed a hesitant hand on Rin-sensei's back. "He's just a genin. If you do this, we'll lose 3 lives instead of just 1. H's face was drawn in a grim determination. Rin-sensei grinned without humor. "Have some faith, Iyasa-san." Her hands flashed through a long series of seals. Ayano tried to keep up, but sensei moved too fast to see each one. "Setsuzoku no chakra," the Jonin declared, and Naruto gasped. Ayano watched, slack-jawed, as Naruto was enveloped in a blue aura that flowed from head and toe toward the hand touching Rin-sensei. Their sensei's hands were glowing a vibrant green once again. "He has that much chakra?" Iyasa had stepped back and was staring at Naruto in awe. Even Natsuko and her older brother were looking at the aura in wonder. Naruto, for his part, looked both confused and a bit afraid. "Don't be afraid, Naruto," sensei said in her kind voice. Ayano noticed that her hands were trembling. "Just need to borrow some chakra for a bit." She took a deep breath, and placed her hands on her patient's injured leg. "I never get used to this sensation." It was a long process, but Ayano could not tear her eyes away from sensei's work. As her hands inched down the man's leg, it seemed as if it ballooned back to life. By the time she got to the foot, the only thing that looked wrong about the leg was tender-looking skin. Ayano was speechless at the transformation. Rin-sensei was amazing. "There," sensei said as her hands lost their glow. Only then did Ayano notice that the medical Jonin and Naruto were both gasping for breath. "It's going to take a long time, but his leg is safe." "I can't believe that worked." Iyasa was staring at Naruto with a focus that set Ayano on edge. "Naruto-kun has the highest chakra reserves out of any genin I've seen," Rin-sensei said with a grin, despite her shaking and gripping the bed with all her might. "That's right," Naruto declared through gasping breaths, holding up a hand with 2 fingers making a V for victory. "I'm the best, Datba." The blonde suddenly wobbled and collapsed onto his rear. "I don't feel so good." "You've gone pale," Ayano muttered, offering him a hand up. Naruto took it with that ever-present grin of his. Much to her annoyance, he leaned most of his weight onto her once she stood him up. A bit of a side effect. Rin-sensei sat down on an open bed. Her entire body was still quivering. Though, I guess I've got it worse than you. She grinned and fell back onto the bed. Rin-sensei. Natsuko snapped out of her stupor and ran toward the collapsed Jonin. The short girl enveloped the downed woman into a hug. Thank you so much. Ayano could hear the tears in her teammate's voice. She still could not wrap her head around seeing Natsuko so vulnerable. It's nothing, Natsuko-chan. Sensei's voice was faint. Iyasa-san, could you? Right, the bald, bearded man said, finally breaking out of his stupor. Rin-senpai will need to rest for a few days, he declared. As will you. He pointed a stern finger at Naruto. Eh? What for? Ayano narrowed her eyes at the blonde and took a step to the left. Without her support, Naruto fell forward before she stepped back and caught him again. Oh, Ayano grinned at his now sheepish tone. I guess that means it's time for us to go, Natsu-chan. Natsuko's older brother's soft voice broke his silence. Mom and Dad will be fine now. Natsuko rose from Rin-sensei's bed and nodded while wiping her eyes with her sleeve. I don't think so. Iyasa interrupted, the light from the setting sun glaring off his glasses. You, Chunin Kahai, have at least a separated shoulder. The Chunin looked to his arm in a sling almost in surprise. I actually forgot, he said with a humorless chuckle. Iyasa shook his head with a sigh, but turned his attention to Ayano and Naruto. He led the blonde to an open bed, which Ayano was grateful for. The boy was heavier than he looked. Not sleepy, Naruto drawled as Iyasa lowered him onto the bed. Of course not, the man said in agreement, but Naruto was already passed out. You too, he then said, turning to Ayano and Natsuko. Should go and get some rest. There's nothing left for you to do here. Right, Ayano said, and waited for Natsuko to finish hugging her brother. As soon as I come back tomorrow, you're going to tell me everything that happened, Meiko ni. Yeah, the boy said in a long-suffering tone, but held Natsuko tight with his good arm. Come on, Natsuko. Ayano put a gentle hand on Natsuko's shoulder. She felt guilty for breaking up the moment, but Iyasa was giving them the evil eye. Natsuko disengaged from her brother with her head hung as Ayano led her away. The girl was quiet until they exited the hospital and the gold and orange light bathed them in its warm glow. See, can I stay at your place tonight, Ayano? Ayano snapped her head toward her teammate at the out-of-the-blue request. Natsuko's gray eyes were locked on the ground in front of them, and a faint blush crept on her cheeks. I don't really want to go to my house. Ayano was put off by just how fragile her teammate sounded at that moment. It had to irk the girl to appear so much different than her normal self. It wouldn't be a problem. It'll be noisy though, Ayano warned her. With sunset came the dinner rush and the non-stop noise that always came with it. I won't mind, the brunette said with a genuine smile. There was no trace of her usual haughtiness at all. Ayano felt more at ease around her teammate than she ever had before. It was funny how seeing someone so open could do that. So much better, Ayano said with a contented sigh. She ran her hands through her hair, enjoying the damp sensation. After a long, tiring day, there was nothing better than a hot bath. She hummed to herself and slid open the door to her room to find her teammate poking around Ayano's bookshelf with a curious eye. See anything you like? Ayano said, not expecting an answer. Natsuko did not strike her as much of a reader. The brunette's finger paused on a thin book that stood out from the rest by the simple fact that the cover was neon orange. Ayano's heart skipped a beat. She had forgotten that she had put that there. Icha, Natsuko read. She bit her lip and thought. Sounds familiar. I swear I heard Ino and Sakura mention this before. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.